Good evening and welcome to Byju's Exam Prep IAS. Am I audible and visible? Thank you, Lalu. Good evening, Bajneet. Good evening, everyone. Let some more people join in and then I'll begin. Good evening, Isha, Akshay. I'm well, thank you. Oh, yeah, July 4th. Yeah, historic day. Yeah, you're right, Arun. The 4th of July, 1776. Good evening, Tarun, Meshak. Good evening, Harshit. I'm fine, thank you. So let's begin today's session. Now, yesterday I finished with American Revolution and we began with the French Revolution. We have discussed the factors, various causes for the outbreak of the French Revolution. To quickly recap whatever I had done yesterday, just a minute. So, to quickly recap whatever I had done yesterday, um, exactly about 6 years after the Americans attained their independence formally, we have in the year 1789 another revolution breaking out in France. This is known as the French Revolution. And the causes of the French Revolution are contained in the peculiar social structure of France. During those days, France had a monarchy and a feudal system of government, and there were three orders or three estates in the society. The first estate consisted of the higher clergy, that is, the higher officials of the church. The second estate consisted of the higher nobility, and the third estate consisted of the commoners. Now, the higher clergy and the higher nobility together were called the privileged classes. They led a very luxurious life. They were very, very rich and led a very luxurious life and never performed any duties towards the church or the government, respectively. They were also excused from the payment of taxation. They were not expected to pay any tax to the government. And therefore, the burden of taxation fell upon the members of the commoners, that is, the third estate. Now, among the third estate, there was a very aware and alert group called the middle classes. Now, the middle classes of France were educated, well above their means, articulate, widely traveled, and these middle classes borrowed some of the ideas given by the French philosophers like Voltaire, Rousseau, and Montesquieu, and they came to believe in those ideas. And they debated and discussed about those ideas, and they came to believe in those ideas. And they were the ones who provided leadership to the masses when the revolution broke out in 1789. In the first stage, at least, it was the middle classes or the bourgeoisie who became the leaders of the revolution. Now, France was a very powerful country in during those days in the 18th century, and whatever happened in France had repercussions throughout Europe. And therefore, the saying that if France sneezes, Europe gets a cold. So that was the impact of France all over Europe. Now, we have discussed the various factors for the outbreak of the revolution. Now, the aims of the middle classes also became the aims of the French Revolution. I have discussed that yesterday. The aims of the middle classes also became the aims of the French Revolution. They demanded freedom of the press, reform in criminal laws. They wanted the emperor to safeguard the personal freedom of citizens. They wanted the privileged classes to be also taxed equally depending upon the revenue. They wanted the sanctity of private property to be upheld, etc. And of course, they wanted to get rid of the ancient regime and establish a new order based on the principles of liberty, equality, and fraternity. So the aims of the middle classes also became the aims of the French Revolution. Now we have discussed the social factors, the privileged classes, the higher clergy, higher nobility, and of course the unprivileged classes. Right? We have discussed all these things. And the most exploited section of the French society were the peasants or the farmers. They were exploited both by the nobles as well as by the clergy. All the burden of taxation fell upon them. And after having paid all the taxes, they were left with only about 20% of their gross produce. And if there was a delay in the rains, if there was a delay in the, if there was a long winter or a long summer, their condition became very, very miserable. And this is what happened 2 years continuously before the outbreak of the revolution. In 1788 and 1787, we have two consecutive years. There was no harvest because there was no rains in major parts of France. As a result, the prices of essential commodities increased by 60%, 60 to 65%. There was shortage of food in the countryside, in the villages, and therefore thousands and lakhs of farmers migrated to Paris. They began to come away to Paris in search of food, in search of bread. And bread riots were going on. People were fighting for bread or were in search of bread or food, creating a very, very revolutionary atmosphere in the city of Paris. Then we have also looked at the political factors. It was a centralized despotism. All the powers were in the hands of the emperor. But then we have earlier very capable emperors who brought glory to France, prosperity to the country. But after the death of Louis XIV, his successors, namely Louis XV and Louis XVI, were incapable, inefficient emperors. And the financial situation became from bad to worse. It was going towards worse from bad. Dismal administrative system, I have already discussed about this. Multiplicity of laws, multiplicity of law courts. You have institutions like the nobility of the robe, where anybody could pay money and become a judge for life. The lettre de cachet, according to which a privileged member of the society could pay money to the government and obtain a document which was signed by the king and countersigned by the Secretary of State. And armed with that document, he could get a commoner arrested and imprisoned. So these were some of the peculiar aspects of the administrative system in France before the revolution. You also have multiplicity of weights and measures and coins, creating a very a huge amount of confusion in the economy and society. Further, of course, the ambitious foreign policy followed by the Bourbon kings. The dynasty which ruled France was the Bourbon dynasty, and the kings of France, namely Louis XIV and XV, engaged France in a number of wars. And of course, the French involvement in the American War of Independence created more problems for France. France spent a huge amount of money in trying to help the Americans in defeating the British. They wanted to take revenge for their defeat in the Seven Years' War, but then did more harm to French monarchy. The French involvement in the American War of Independence did more harm to French monarchy because Republican ideas percolated from America into France. Ideas like liberty, equality, fraternity, republicanism, rule of law, separation of powers, etc., etc., natural rights of man, all those things. And when the revolution broke out in France, it was the French volunteers who had gone to America. They were the ones who spread these sentiments among the Frenchmen. So the French involvement in the American War of Independence did more harm to French monarchy than otherwise. So we have looked at all these things yesterday. Then economic factors, the taxation system was very unfair as well as oppressive. Unfair because the privileged classes were exempted from the payment of taxation, and oppressive because of the tax farming system. So the only beneficiary under the tax farming system was the tax farmer, and not the state or the or anybody else. Right? Only the tax farmer was the beneficiary. The loser was the peasant and the state as such. Then we looked at the contributions of philosophers, the French philosophers like Voltaire, Rousseau, Montesquieu. Voltaire spoke about supremacy of reason and enlightened despotism. So before he wanted the people of France to question everything before they are asked to follow a particular act or practice or belief system. He wanted them to question everything, and only when a rational explanation was given, a logical explanation was given for that, only then accept those ideas. And he believed in a enlightened despot who will take care of his subjects, has his own people, has his own children, right? Similarly, then we have Rousseau. Rousseau spoke about popular sovereignty, that if the government doesn't take care of the interests of its subjects, then the people have a right to revolt against that form of government and have a government of their choice. And he also spoke about civil freedom, social equality, and the rights of man. Montesquieu, of course, spoke about the division of powers between the legislature, executive, and the judiciary. He did not want all these three powers to be in one person, in the hands of the emperor. Basically, he wanted that these should be separate. So these are revolutionary ideas, not only in the history of France, but in the history of humanity. Whatever ideas these philosophers gave, and I told you that they whatever they spoke or wrote about, they couched it in a very moderate tone and tenor, and they spoke about these ideas very, very secretly. It was the middle classes who borrowed these ideas, who absorbed these ideas given by these philosophers. They came to believe in those ideas, and later they were the ones, the middle classes, who gave leadership to the masses. So, therefore, to say that the revolution was caused by the philosophers, by the French philosophers, would be wrong. They only acted as a catalyst. They brought the revolution nearer by pinpointing the evils, the rotten state of affairs in which France was at that point in time. All the aspects of French life, polity, society, economy, and religion was full of evils, and that's what these philosophers pointed out. That way they brought the revolution nearer. The French Revolution, would have happened even otherwise, even without the absence of the philosophers. Only thing is, it would have taken a few more time. It would have probably taken a few more decades, but it would have either way happened. The philosophers only brought it nearer, right? We have looked at this, and of course, we have the the physiocrats. I've already spoken about it. The French physiocrats were the French economists. They gave a slight twist to the theory of mercantilism. They wanted the introduction of free trade, so that the shackles of the guilds could be broken. And at the same time, they wanted the government to give importance to agriculture. So these are the French physiocrats. And of course, the economic crisis which France was facing. You have the hard earned money from the farmers, which were collected as taxes by the monarch and the feudal classes, using it for conspicuous consumption, that is, using it for luxurious living. Uh, the wars which the French emperors had forced the country into. Then, of course, the backward methods of agriculture, shortage of land, backward methods of agriculture, the privileged classes being exempted from the payment of taxation, the tax farming system, the privileged classes preventing the emperor from bringing about reforms, the interference in administration of queens, and of course, France had borrowed loans from European countries to tide over her financial problems, and the total income of France was less than the interest payable on those borrowed loans. And of course, to add to the seriousness of the situation in the country, for 2 consecutive years, rains failed and there was no harvest. So there was inflationary conditions, shortage of food, and high prices. And thousands and lakhs of farmers from the rural areas of France came away to Paris in search of food, creating a very, very revolutionary atmosphere. And these are the circumstances which brought Louis XVI to power. He became the Emperor of France on the eve of the revolution, and he was married to an Austrian princess called Maria Antoinette. And between them, they had 4 children. Louis and Maria had 4 children between them. And one of the weakness of Louis was he could never say no to his wife. He could never say no to his wife. And the nobles took advantage of that. The privileged classes took advantage of that. And if they could not get things done directly from Louis, they would go through the queen to get get their desires fulfilled. Now, I stopped here, I suppose, yesterday. I stopped here. Let me continue from here. Yeah, definitely. That was one of the aims of the French Revolution also. Liberty, equality, fraternity. Those were not there. Those were not there. Pampero Mina, Pampero Mina. They were not. Those sentiments were not there before the revolution. So that was also one of the desires of the people of France. Okay, now let's move on. Okay, so I will start from Turgot. Okay, I'll start from Turgot. Now here, when Louis the 16th ascended the throne of France, we have some ministers, senior ministers, experienced ministers, who came and advised Louis about the grave financial situation. And immediately, Louis the 16th went down to business. He appointed a person called Turgot to suggest reforms. So this is Turgot for you on your screen. This is Turgot, and this is Necker. This is Necker. So Turgot and Necker. So, firstly, he appointed Turgot to advise the emperor as to what are the reforms that could be brought about to improve the financial situation of France. And it did not take long for Turgot to suggest reforms. He suggested three main reforms. One is to curtail useless governmental expenditure, to curtail the useless governmental expenditure, to reduce the governmental expenditure which was not necessary. That is number one. Number two is he wanted the privileged classes to be taxed, and also abolition of the tax farming system. He wanted the abolition of the tax farming system and the privileged classes to be taxed. And thirdly, he wanted the introduction of free trade. Now, if these reforms, these are the suggestions made by Turgot, and if these reforms were implemented by Louis, then it would have adversely affected the privileges of the privileged classes. Therefore, they ran to Maria and filled up the ears of Maria against Turgot, and told Maria that Turgot is advising wrong things to her husband, and therefore Turgot should be removed from his position as Controller General of Finance. And Maria ordered her husband, Louis XVI, to dismiss Turgot. And this Turgot was summarily dismissed. So once Turgot was dismissed, Louis appointed another person called Necker to to advise him regarding the reforms to be brought about to improve the financial condition of the country. Necker was a banker from Geneva, Switzerland. So he was a genuine banker and also a very experienced man, economics man. And Necker also advised the same things. Whatever Turgot had advised Louis, the same advice was given by Necker. But then Necker went one step further. What are the advice given by Turgot, which was repeated by Necker? Tax the privileged classes, abolish tax farming system, introduce free trade, reduce governmental expenditure. And Necker went one step further. He published the income and expenditure of all the employees of the government in black and white. That is, what is the income or salary of each of the officials, and what are the various heads of governmental expenditure. That was published in black and white by Necker for everybody to. So everybody came to know on what are the various items of expenditure, who is earning how much of income, etc. Now, till now, all these were kept a secret by the government, and now it was out in the open. And the privileged classes were very, very angry with Necker for having done this. So again they went to Maria, filled up the ears of Maria against Necker, and saw to it that Necker was dismissed. So Maria ordered her husband to dismiss Necker also. And Necker was necked out. Necker was also kicked out of the government. So Turgot was dismissed, Necker was dismissed, and then Louis appointed another person called Calonne, Calonne, to make suggestions. Again, Calonne more or less did the same advice, gave the same advice. And Calonne also was dismissed. So Turgot, Necker, Calonne were dismissed. And then other officers who were appointed couldn't have solved the problems of the country. They were all sycophants. They will not advise anything, otherwise they will lose their jobs and lose their salaries. So here, Louis made a mistake here in dismissing these officers. They were very good at economics. They understood what the country was going through, and if he had implemented those suggestions, at least the economic problem of the country could have improved. But he did not do that. Listening to his queen, he simply dismissed those officers. So now the situation, the economic situation, was getting worse. From bad, it was moving towards worse, right? And then what did a desperate Louis do? He called a meeting of the Assembly of Notables. he called a meeting of the Assembly of Notables. What is this Assembly of Notables? It consisted of some members of the higher clergy and the higher nobility. So there were some higher clergy and higher nobility, important members sitting there in the Assembly of Notables. And he asked their permission to tax the privileged classes. So he asked the Assembly of Notables to give him permission to tax the privileged classes. Now, the Assembly of Notables refused. The Assembly of Notables refused. Instead, the Assembly of Notables suggested to Louis that he call a meeting of the Estates General. Understand this? The Assembly of Notables refused him permission to tax the privileged classes. But then instead, the Assembly of Notables suggested to Louis that he call a meeting of the so-called Estates General. Now, what is this Estates General? The Estates General was the medieval feudal parliament of France. In the medieval period, there was a parliament in France, and that parliament, which existed in France, was called the Estates General. Now, what was the constitution of the Estates General? Basically, it was a three-tiered body. You can see here on your screen. This was a three-tiered body. That is, three houses were there in this parliament. You have the first house, which consisted of the higher clergy. You can see here on your screen, you have the first estate, the higher clergy, and they were represented by 300 members. Then we have the second estate, consisting of higher nobility, again represented by 300 members. And the commoners, the third estate, were represented by 300 members. So 300 apiece. First estate 300, second estate 300, third estate 300. Though there were 300 members in each estate or order, they had only one vote. As a house, they had only one vote. So that means higher clergy had one vote, the higher nobility had one vote, and the commoners had one vote. Now, and you all know this, higher clergy and higher nobility were the privileged classes of France. They were the privileged classes. Now, during medieval times, whenever something was brought before the Estates General for its consideration, for its voting, what the privileged classes would do is, if they came to know that that particular measure would adversely affect their prospects, they would join together. The higher clergy and the higher nobility would join together and outvote the commoners. So therefore, the ratio always used to be 2:1, because the higher clergy and the higher nobility have joined together and they have outvoted the commoners. This was the state of affairs in medieval times. Did you understand? Estates General was the medieval feudal parliament of France. Clear? All of you, can you raise your hands? Did you understand what was this Estates General? So in medieval times, it was a parliament consisting of three houses represented by the three estates, first estate, second estate, third estate. Each of these estates had 300 members apiece. But as a body, they had one vote only. And whenever anything was brought before the Estates General for its consideration, the members of the privileged classes will join together and outvote the commoners, because if that particular measure or law is passed, it will adversely affect them. So whenever any situation arose like that, where their prospects could be affected adversely, the privileged classes would join together and they'll outvote the commoners. Therefore, the ratio always used to be 2:1. Got it, na? Okay. So that was the state of affairs. Now, when was the last meeting of the Estates General? On your screen, when was the last meeting of the Estates General? 1614. The last meeting of the Estates General had taken place in 1614. We are in which year at this point in time when Louis ascended the throne and the revolution was about to break out? We were in the year 1789, and the last meeting of the Estates General had taken place in 1614. So if you subtract 1789 minus 1614, you get 175. So it had met 175 years back, the Estates General. So Estates General had a body, did not exist. All the members of the Estates General had died long time back. When the Assembly of Notables asked Louis to call a meeting of the Estates General, he couldn't have done it immediately because it had to be reconstituted. As I told you, the last meeting of the Estates General had taken place 175 years back. That was in 1614. Did you understand? So without reconstituting the Estates General, he couldn't have called a meeting. And therefore, a desperate Louis called a meeting of the Parliament of Paris. There was a parliament in Paris. And he decided to call a meeting of the Parliament of Paris. And he sought their permission to borrow extra loans from European countries. Already France was in debt. She had borrowed huge amount of loan from various European countries for which she was paying interest. Now, to tide over the financial crisis, he wanted to borrow further loans, more loans from foreign countries. And he sought the permission of the Parliament of Paris for the same. But the Parliament of Paris refused to give him permission. So, without any choice, a desperate Louis decided to call a meeting of the Estates General. And the summoning of the Estates General is said to mark the beginning of the French Revolution. Did you understand? Ramandeep, just hold on. You'll understand how. So, Estate General had to be reconstituted. That is, again, elections has to take place, where all the three estates will choose 300 representatives to represent them. A piece, where the higher clergy will choose 300 to represent them. Higher nobility will choose 300 to represent them in the Estate General. Again, the commoners will choose 300 to represent them in the Estates General. That was yet to take place. So Louis decided to reconstitute the Estates General, and he decided to call a meeting of the Estates General. And the summoning of the Estates General is said to mark the beginning of the French Revolution. Are you there with me till here, all of you? No, don't worry about that part, Sakshi. It was he wanted the approval of the representative body. Estates General was the representative body of the people of France. All the three estates were represented there. So he wanted to seek the approval and the support of the representative body of France. And it was inevitable for him to call a meeting because he had no choice. So all of you are clear now. Okay, now look here. Now, Necker, see, when Necker had made certain suggestions, Necker also had been dismissed by Louis. Now, to reconstitute the Estates General, Louis summoned Necker. He called Necker to him and told Necker, Necker, I'm giving you the responsibility of reconstituting the Estates General. You take the responsibility and conduct elections to all these three estates. And that way, you reconstitute the Estates General, and then I'll call a meeting. As I told you, and as you all know by this time, it had met 175 years back, the Estates General. So it had to be freshly elected. So Necker went down to business. This was the responsibility given to him by the emperor himself. So what did Necker do? He conducted elections to the higher clergy, first of all, right? And the higher clergy elected 300 members amongst them to represent them. So this is number one, right? So 300 members were elected by the higher clergy to represent them. Then he conducted elections to the higher nobility. And the higher nobility also elected 300 members to represent them in the Estates General. Then Necker was a member of the commoners. Please understand, he was a member of the commoners, Necker. So what he did is he also conducted elections to the members of the third estate, that is the commoners, but he increased the size of the third estate to 600. That is double than what it was earlier. So from 300, he made the number 600. He increased the size of the third estate to 600. So 300 plus 300, right? But please understand, either way, even if he had got elected 1,000 people to the third estate, as a body, they had only one vote. Please remember that. As a body, each of these houses only had one vote, isn't it? So the privileged classes did not bother because either way, as a body, everybody has only one vote. The higher clergy have one vote, the higher nobility have one vote, and the commoners also have one vote. So he has doubled the size of the commoners to 600. And please understand, if voting by individuals was introduced, instead of voting by estates or orders, if voting by individuals was introduced, then it would have benefited the members of the third estate. Why? Because some members of the higher clergy and the higher nobility might have cross voted. They might have cross voted in favor of the commoners if there was if voting by individuals would be introduced. Did you understand? Now, having constituted the Estates General, Necker informed Louis that he has done his job. He has conducted the elections to all the three estates, and therefore the Estates General's meeting can be called, right? And Louis fixed a particular date. He fixed May the 5th, 1789, as the date where the Estates General would be meeting for the first time after a gap of 175 years. Sorry, hurry, just hold on. Because you have members of the third estate also demanding voting by individuals. They had been demanding voting by individuals, but that had not been approved by the emperor. But either way, he increased the size to 600, and then he informed Louis the 16th to call a meeting. And May 5th was fixed as the date. 5th of May 1789 was fixed as the date for the meeting of the Estates General. And you see here, this is the Estates General and the August Assembly, consisting of all the three estates, have assembled in this huge hall. First estate, second estate, third estate. All of them are sitting in this hall, and they're waiting for Louis the 16th to come and address them. They are waiting for Louis to come and address them. So they have all gathered in this huge hall where the Estates General is meeting after 175 years. Now, please understand, on the eve of the Estates General's meeting, that is on 5th of May 1789, the members of the third estate made three demands before Louis the 16th. Now, I quote your attention. I'll tell you what are the three demands made by the members of the third estate. So, on the eve of the Estates General meeting, three demands were put forth by the members of the third estate. Number one, as the Estates General represents national problems and as it represents all sections of French society, it should be renamed as National Assembly. This is number one. They wanted the Estates General to be renamed as what? As National Assembly. Why? Because it represents all sections of French society and it represents national problems because all the three estates are represented there in the Estates General. So they are telling you rename that same body as National Assembly. That is number one. Number two, they said you convert this into a single chambered body. Convert the National Assembly into a single chambered organization, single chambered body. Why should we sit separately? First estate, second estate, third estate. We will all sit together. So therefore, they said you convert this into a single chambered organization so that we all sit together. Right? And number three, they demanded voting by individuals, not voting by orders or estate. Each person in the in the National Assembly or the Estates General should have one vote each. So they demanded voting by individuals. These are the three demands put forth by the members of the third estate on the eve of the Estates General's meeting. The meeting is yet to take place. They have all assembled in this hall and they're waiting for Louis to come and address them. Did you get me that, all of you? Can you raise your hands? Clear? Can I move on? Okay. Right. Now look here. Now, I'm again asking you the same question. If these three demands of the third estate are agreed or approved by Louis the 16th, it will adversely affect which section of the French society? It will affect which section of the French society if these three demands are accepted or agreed upon by Louis? Obviously, the privileged classes, the estate 1 and 2. Very good, Brajneet. The privileged classes. Kartika, Hari, all of you are right. So it would have adversely affected the privileged classes. So therefore, before the meeting took place, before Louis came to address the meeting, they ran to Maria. The privileged classes ran to Maria and told Maria, Madam, please see that this meeting is not held because the members of the third estate are putting forth the unreasonable demands, and see to it that your husband doesn't conduct this meeting. And Maria simply ordered her husband to cancel the meeting. Now, can you beat it? And Louis listened to his queen Maria and he cancelled the meeting. He was the one who had ordered Necker to reconstitute the Estates General. Elections had taken place for all the three estates, and a date also had been fixed. But listening to the bowing down to the pressure exerted by the privileged classes, And again, since his queen was telling him, Louis decided to cancel the meeting. So a soldier comes to the hall where all the three estates had gathered and informs everybody that please go home because the meeting has been cancelled by Louis the 16th. Now, the privileged classes were very, very happy. That's what they wanted. So they gleefully, happily walked out of the hall. And the members of the third estate walked out grudgingly. They were very, very angry that the meeting has been cancelled and that their demands are not being fulfilled by Louis XVI, the three demands which they had put forth before the emperor. But they did not go home. They came out of the hall, but they did not go home, the members of the third estate. What did they do? They assembled in a nearby tennis court where the royal family used to play tennis. And there they take an oath. The members of the third estate assembled in a tennis court where the royal family used to play tennis. And there they take an oath. That is called tennis court oath. You can see here on your screen. This is called the tennis court oath. What is the oath they take? The oath they take is, until our three demands are met, we will not go home. We are going to stay here and we are not going to go home. Louis has to call a meeting and has to approve our demands. And please understand, this is the tennis court oath. Our three demands have to be met by Louis the 16th. Until then, unless he meets our demands, we will not go home. Now, please understand, for the first time in the history of France, the members of the third estate were defying the emperor. They were not listening to the emperor. They were defying him. And Louis was very, very angry and at the same time shocked and surprised at the reaction of the members of the third estate. Now, what did Louis do? Once he came to know that the members of the third estate have gathered in the tennis court and they are not going away from there, going to their homes, he decided to call a meeting. He said, okay, you assemble again in the hall and I'll conduct the meeting. It looked like the emperor had accepted his defeat, that he had bowed down to the pressure exerted on him by the members of the third estate and that he had accepted his defeat. But then, of course, you have the members of the third estate. Again, they went back to sit in the hall, thinking that Louis is going to conduct the meeting. But then Louis had other plans. What did Louis do? Louis called a section. He summoned a section of the French army to come to Paris. So he ordered a section of the French army to come to Paris. What was the idea? The idea was to ruthlessly put down the members of the third estate. That was the plan of Louis XVI. So a section of the French army was summoned to Paris, and when the army came, a section of the army came to Paris, what happened? You have who were there on the streets of Paris? Thousands and lakhs of farmers from various parts of France. They were searching for food. They were the hungry, starving millions. And they figured out what was the intention of Louis. Louis has summoned a section of the army to put down their representatives who were sitting in the third estate. And as a result, you have pitched battles breaking out. You have the farmers, the hungry, starving millions, fighting against the French soldiers. And they butchered them. These hungry, starving millions, the farmers, artisans, etc., they were outnumbered. Basically, the soldiers were outnumbered. So these farmers caught hold of these soldiers and they butchered them, killed them. And you have blood flowing like water on the streets of Paris. The members of the third estate, who were supported by the farmers, the artisans, and other sections of the commoners, they attacked the Bastille. You can see here on the screen, this is called the fall of the Bastille. The Bastille was the central prison of France. This is the central prison of France, a symbol of the odious regime. You see, anybody who had invited the wrath or anger of the emperor or the government was shut here inside the prison. He was arrested and imprisoned. So therefore, it was a symbol of hatred on the part of the third estate. They did not like the Bastille. So they took their anger against the Bastille. They attacked the Bastille. They broke open the gates of the Bastille and they freed all the prisoners. Of course, there were only 7 prisoners at that point in time. So the Bastille fell on this date, July the 14th, 1789. And the fall of the Bastille is considered to be a very momentous incident in the history of France. It is considered to be a very important event in the history of France by the French historians. Why? Because it is considered to be the triumph of liberty. It is considered to be a triumph of liberty which spread throughout France and later throughout Europe. it is considered to be a triumph of liberty. Then you have the revolutionaries, the members of the third estate, supported by the commoners. They established a municipal government. A parallel government was established in Paris. That is called a municipal government. You see, you have the government of the emperor existing in Paris. So, along with the emperor's government, you have a parallel government or a provisional government, a temporary government which comes into existence. A parallel government. They call that parallel government as municipal government, right? So, this was a government established by the members of the third estate. To guard the municipal government, a national guard was established, and this was under Lafayette. So this was under Lafayette. This is Lafayette for you on your screen. So one of the revolutionaries who had gone to America to fight against the British during the American Revolution. So the National Guard was under the control of Lafayette. Then, when the farmers in the provinces, in the countryside, heard about the fall of the Bastille, they were up in revolt. Throughout, so it spread like wildfire. It spread like wildfire. The news of the fall of the Bastille had reached the countryside, and peasants, you have peasant revolts breaking out in various parts of France. And what did the peasants do? The farmers do? They uprooted local authority. It was easy for them to uproot local authority, and the feudal lords surrendered their feudal rights and privileges. They got scared, the feudal lords, and they surrendered their feudal rights and privileges. Right? Sale and purchase of offices was abolished, like the nobility of the robe. Nobility of the robe, sale and purchase of offices, like nobility of the robe, was abolished. Class distinctions were brought an end to, and the principle of equality was upheld. Class distinctions were put an end to, and the principle of equality was upheld. Reason for the fall of the Bastille. Ankita, I'm coming here. So you see, I told you, Louis fixed May the 5th as the date for the meeting of the Essays General. Now, listening to his queen, he cancelled the meeting. Right. Then what happened? You have the members of the third estate. They did not go home. They cleared the hall, but they did not go home. They met in the nearby tennis court and took an oath that until their demands are met, they're not going to clear from here. Now that resulted in Louis agreeing to conduct the meeting, but he did not. He secretly called a section of the army to put down the members of the third estate. That resulted in the members of the third estate taking their anger against the Bastille. They attacked the Bastille, they broke open the gates of the Bastille, and that resulted in peasant revolts in other parts of France, in the rural side, where they uprooted local authority. A parallel government or a municipal government was established in Paris. To guard the municipal government, a national guard was established, a militia was established, because you see, the Louis might again call more army, more armed forces to put down the municipal government. Therefore, they establish one national guard so that they have their own militia to safeguard the members of the national government. Did you understand? Sale and purchases of offices was abolished, and the class distinctions were put an end to, and the principle of equality were upheld. Now, please understand, this particular fall of the Bastille and simultaneously revolts all over the country of France shocked Louis. It had happened so fast that he could not control it. He did not know what to do. Now, what did Louis do? Louis restored Necker to his former position. He had dismissed Necker when Necker had increased the size to 600. Right? He had increased the size of the Estates General to 600. So he restored Necker to his former position. He asked the soldiers to go back to their barracks. Whichever soldiers had escaped the wrath of the commoners, they were asked to go back to their barracks. And Louis agreed to recognize the Estates General as the National Assembly. So therefore, now we have the National Assembly, which comes into existence, and it was in power for 2 years. Basically, the Estates General has now been recognized as the National Assembly by Louis the 16th. Are you there with me? So you can see here, this is the National Assembly. This is the National Assembly. This is the National Assembly, which was in power for 2 years, 1789 to 91. Are you there with me, all of you? What's your question, Meena? Can you repeat your question, please? No, the members of the third estate, they are the ones who attacked the Bastille, Ramandeep. They attacked the Bastille. They took their anger against the Bastille because that was the symbol of the monarchy as well as the unjust order in France. So I told you, anybody who had invited the anger of the emperor or the feudal classes were used to be shut inside the Bastille. So they attacked the Bastille and took their anger against the Bastille by freeing the prisoners from the Bastille. And the fall of the Bastille is considered to be a very important event in the history of France because I told you it is considered to be a triumph of liberty which spread throughout France. Clear, all of you till here? Hello? Clear? Okay. Now look here. Lafayette is the name of a person, Tarun. Lafayette was the head of the National Guard. Right? Now, Ramandeep, you're asking me a question which I would not know. Please tell me why Louis was always listening to his wife. He was king handling everything. Yeah, but still he was a husband. Okay, he might be a king, but still he was a husband. And he was, always trying to please his wife. He could not say no to his wife. That was his weakness. No, whether Bastille still exists or not, I'm not very sure about that. Pumper Boina, right? Okay, now we'll come back here. Now let's talk about the National Assembly. So the Estates General has been recognized as the National Assembly by Louis the 16th. Please understand this. Now, what did the National Assembly do? The National Assembly brought out a constitution for France. This is called the Constitution of 1791. This is the Constitution of 1791. So for the first time, a constitutional document comes into existence in France. So this is also called the Constitution of the Year One. It's also known as Constitution of the Year One. Of the Year One. Now, what did this Constitution do? The Constitution of 1791 do, or the National Assembly do through the Constitution? Feudalism was abolished, serfdom was abolished, class distinctions and privileges were brought an end to. On your screen, all of you, feudalism was ended, serfdom was ended, and class distinctions and privileges were brought an end to. That is number one. Number two, taxes were to be paid in proportion to the revenues. You will see that was one of the aims of the middle classes. The concept of they wanted the introduction of the concept of equitable distribution of the incidence of taxation. That is, if somebody has more income, he should pay more tax. So here, taxes were to be paid by everybody in proportion to their income or revenues. So that was introduced. Public expenses were to be borne by everybody. That is, if a road is being built, a bridge is being built, or dam is being built, everybody should, all the public should participate in funding that particular public works. Okay, so public expenses to be borne by everybody. The nobles gave up their medieval rights and privileges, and the clergy gave up their tithes. Whatever taxes they were collecting, the clergy called tithes, they gave up that, and the nobles gave up their medieval feudal rights and privileges. Sale of offices was abolished, like the nobility of the robe. Anybody could become a judge by paying money, isn't it? So such things were abolished. Letter de cache, nobility of the robe, they were all removed. And then, of course, you have another document called the Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen. Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen. These are the important provisions of the Constitution of 1791. Feudalism was outlawed, it was prohibited, it was banned. Feudalism, serfdom, class distinctions, and privileges came to an end. Taxes to be paid by everybody in proportion to their revenues. Public expenses to be borne by everybody. Clergy gave up their tithes, and the feudal lords, they have medieval rights and privileges. Sale of offices was abolished, and you have a document called Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen. So, what is this Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen? Now, please understand, this particular document called the Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen was influenced by the constitutional document of England and the Bill of Rights of America. The people of America had given themselves a Bill of Rights, that is, natural rights of a human being, what we call as fundamental rights. So this particular document was influenced by the constitutional document of England as well as America, particularly the Bill of Rights of America. Now, whatever was absent in France, the people of France gave themselves these freedoms and rights. Each and every individual in France came to occupy or enjoy these rights, which they had till now not enjoying. Let us understand this. Number one, what did it say? Men are born free, remain free, and are equal in rights. This is number one. Men are born free, remain free, and are equal in rights. Number two, every political institution should protect the rights of man. These are liberty, property, security, and resistance to oppression. This is number two. Number three, free communication of thought and opinion is one of the most precious rights of man. What was the case earlier in France? People were afraid to speak against the government, or if they have some original idea, they were hesitant to speak. But otherwise, why? Because they could be arrested, they could be imprisoned in the Bastille, in the central prison, they could be tortured and killed. Even the philosophers were scared to speak out. So here they gave themselves this privilege. Free communication of thought and opinion is one of the most precious rights of man. Number four, no person should be accused, arrested, or imprisoned arbitrarily. What was the case in France before this? Anybody armed with a letter de cachet, a privileged member of the society, can get a commoner arrested and imprisoned without any charge, without any reason. Here, it said the Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen said no person should be accused, arrested, or imprisoned arbitrarily without any reason. Further, no one shall be deprived of his right over his property except in the case of public need. Even then, adequate compensation shall be paid to the owner. So, what was the case earlier? A privileged member can easily confiscate the property of a commoner without, and he is not answerable to anybody. He could easily take away the property of a commoner. There was no sanctity to private property. But here, they have given themselves that no person shall be deprived of his right over his property except in the case of public need. That is the case even now, isn't it? Let us say I have my house, right, and let us say the government wants to make a metro where my house is located. So the metro route will pass through the land where my house is located. What will what will the government do? The government will give me a notice and ask me to vacate from there. And it will also give me a compensation because that land is required for public use. And I will have to take that compensation and go and build a house somewhere else or buy a house somewhere else. So only in the case of public need, property can be taken by the government. Nobody else can take away the property of anybody else. Further, sovereignty resides in the nation. So nation is supreme. Nobody is above the nation. Sovereignty resides in the nation, and nobody can take the power into his hands and act. Further, law is the expression of the general will, and hence all citizens have the right to take part personally or through their representatives in its formation. So, people should play a proactive role in the making of law. Then, people have the right to control the finances of the country, and all the officials of the state should be responsible to the people and to the country. This is known as the Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen. Are you there with me, all of you? Yeah. No, Tarun, see, that's the case, isn't it? If let us say there's a highway coming up, okay? Let us say you have a farmhouse, very near to the highway, and the highway government wants to broaden the highway. What will the government do? It will confiscate all the lands because it is necessary for the widening of the highway. And whoever is having lands there, which will again be taken away by the government, they'll be paid compensation. Government rates will be given and not whatever the party demands. That is the case even now, right? So those things were introduced in France as early as 1789, soon after the National Assembly came into existence. So this is the Constitution of 1791. Then we have. Did you understand here? So please understand this Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen is considered to be relevant not only for the people of France but also for people everywhere, wherever they were under any unjust or unjust government. Okay, wherever they were under any exploitation or under any unjust government, this particular document would be relevant. Now, the Constitution of 1791 or the National Assembly also brought about changes in the administration. So what are the changes brought about to the administration by this Constitution of 1791? We have a uniform administration introduced throughout France. Earlier, what was the case? We have discussed this dismal administrative system. Different parts of France, we have different types of laws. Okay, multiplicity, overlapping of departments, multiplicity of laws, multiplicity of law codes, multiplicity of weights and measures, multiplicity of coinage, etc. So here, all those things were done away with. You have a uniform administration introduced throughout the country. Entire country was divided into 83 departments. Entire country was divided to 83 departments of uniform size and population. What is the meaning of this? You see, let us say there's a police department, there's a revenue department, there's an education department, or finance department. So the personnel working in each of these departments will be uniform. They'll be of uniform size and population. So let us say the police department has 5,000 people. I'm just giving a hypothetical example. All the departments will have equal number of people, 5,000 apiece. Okay, so the entire country was divided into 83 departments of uniform size and population, and these departments were named after natural features like rivers and mountains. So departments were named after natural features like rivers and mountains. Then you have the administrative reorganization of the country. Like for example, in India we have country, state. Some states have division, then district, then taluk or tehsil, then village. Similarly, in France you have uh, department. Below that, you have a canton. Below that, you have a commune. And below that, you have a city. So each of the heads of these administrative organized organs were elected by the people. They were elected. For example, you have the canton under a prefect. So the canton was under a prefect. Commune was under a sub-prefect. City was under a mayor. All these were elected by the people of France. So you have elections introduced. Then we have the Montesquieu's theory of separation of powers, which was enunciated. It was applied. The separation of powers, legislature, executive, judiciary came to be separated. So you have the legislature. So legislature was in the hands of a legislative assembly consisting of 745 members. Understand this? So you have a legislative assembly consisting of how many members? So this was the lawmaking body of France now, the legislature. This was a legislative assembly. It had 745 members. Now, please understand, all the people of France, the entire population of France was not given voting rights. We'll analyze this National Assembly and the provisions and the reforms brought about by it in some time, the merits and the demerits. We will analyze that later. We'll only look at the factual aspect now. What are the various reforms brought about by the National Assembly and the Constitution of 1791? So here the legislature was in the hands of a legislative assembly consisting of 745 members. Now, voting rights were given to only the active citizens of France. Understand this, please. Active citizens. What is the meaning of active citizens? Here, active citizens in the context of the French Revolution meant those citizens who had property with them and paid taxes to the government. Only they could vote, right? They were called active citizens. So I have property with me, I have a house, I have some lands, only I will be given voting rights. Somebody doesn't have, let us say, property, doesn't have any land or property or house, he cannot vote. So major portions of the French population were denied franchise, they were denied voting rights. So here only active citizens were given voting rights. And thus, this particular constitution came to be dominated by the middle classes of France. Middle classes of France secured their own interests. They were, everybody in the middle class had property with them. And therefore, they also gave themselves voting rights. So, this particular constitution was dominated by the middle class. We'll come to that. Legislature. Then we come to the executive. So, executive authority was in the hands of the king, and the king was given suspensive veto. What is suspensive veto? The legislative assembly will pass a bill, okay, and that bill to become a law will go to the king for his signature. Let us say the king returns the bill back to the legislative assembly. The legislative assembly again will pass the same bill. Now that bill will come to the king for the second time. He cannot again send it back to the legislative assembly. He's supposed to sign so that it becomes a law. So he could only delay the execution of the law. The king could only delay the execution of the law. He could not alter or change the character of the bill passed by the legislative assembly. That is called suspensive veto. The king was given suspensive veto, right? And he was assisted by ministers in the discharge of his executive duties. But these ministers could not sit in the legislative assembly. I repeat, the king became the executive head. He was given suspensive veto, and he was assisted by ministers in the discharge of his duties, in the discharge of his executive duties. But those ministers, in turn, could not sit in the legislative assembly. Further, we have changes brought about in the judiciary also. Now, the judges came to be elected by the people. So, judges will be elected by the people. So, the nobility of the robe was abolished. There was no more nobility of the robe. Anybody could become a judge by paying money earlier, isn't it? That was abolished. Now, judges were elected by the people, and they would be in office for between 2 to 4 years. They'll be in office between 2 to 4 years. And the jury system was introduced. What is jury system? You have a panel of judges. Let us say 3 judges or 5 judges or 7 judges, like that. Jury system. So the majority decision prevails. Out of the 3 judges, let us say 2 say yes and 1 say no. One says no. Whatever is the decision of the majority judges, that will hold. So jury system was introduced. These are the changes brought about in the administration. Are you there with me? All of you clear? Hari, don't bother about that. Whether the prefect was position was equal to collector and all that, not necessary. And then they were elected. The people elected only the one with the property rights. Only they elected the members of the legislative assembly on the basis of property rights. Parveen, on what basis they were elected? On the basis of property rights. So that person has a property, he can get voting rights. Are you there with me, all of you? These are the changes brought about in the administration. Then we come to financial measures. Please understand, France was still going through a financial problem, a serious financial crisis, and the National Assembly sincerely wanted to improve the financial position of the country. What did the National Assembly do in that context? The property with the church was confiscated. Whatever property was there, church property. So, church was a very powerful and rich body in France. So it had thousands and lakhs of acres of land, a lot of jewelry, etc. So what the National Assembly did is it confiscated the entire property of the church, the wealth of the church, keeping that as security. So church property was confiscated, and keeping that as security, keeping the church property as security, paper currency called assignats were introduced. Assignats are paper currency. Paper currency called assignats were introduced. This, to a large extent, improved the financial condition of France. But then please understand, overprinting of paper currency, overprinting of assignats later led to inflation. It led to inflation later. That is one of the demerits of the National Assembly. We'll come to that later. So, I again repeat, in order to tide over or improve the financial condition of the country, the National Assembly confiscated all the property of the church, and keeping that as security, introduced paper currency called assignats. And that, to a large extent, improved the financial condition of the country. Then, what are the changes brought about in the religious field? You have monasteries and religious communities were suppressed. So, you see, the church property was all confiscated, and monasteries and religious communities were suppressed. Absolute religious toleration was accorded. The number of bishops were reduced. The number of bishops were reduced. They were to be elected by the people. They were to be elected by the people and paid by the state. So the number of bishops were reduced. They were to be elected by the people and paid by the government or the state. And the Pope's authority over the bishops became nominal. What is nominal? Namke vaste. Namke vaste. No, it is not real. The Pope, who is the Pope? The Pope is the head of the Roman Catholics throughout the world. Where will the Pope, which is the headquarters of the Pope? Vatican City, Rome, Italy. And we are talking about France. So the Pope is considered to be the representative of Lord Jesus Christ throughout the world. Even now, the Pope is considered to be that. the representative of Lord Jesus Christ. That's what the Roman Catholics think. Now, here, Pope's authority over the bishops was only made nominal, not real. And all the clergy people of France were asked to sign this document called the Civil Constitution of the Clergy. Understand this? The Civil Constitution of the Clergy. This was a document which was expected to be signed by each and every member of the clergy of France. Those clergy who signed this document, usually mostly what happened is the higher clergy signed this document. So those clergy who signed this document were called juring clergy. So they were called juring clergy, those who signed the document. And those who did not sign this document came to be called non-juring clergy. They did not sign this document. And generally, who did not sign this document? The lower clergy did not sign. The lower clergy, that is the lower officials of the church, did not sign this document called the Civil Constitution of the Clergy. Now, please understand, why did they not sign? Now, what did this Civil Constitution of the Clergy say? The Civil Constitution of the Clergy said that the Pope's authority over the bishops and the clergy will be only nominal, not real. And the lower clergy were looking up to the Pope for his guidance and blessing, because they considered the Pope as the representative of Lord Jesus Christ. When the um, when the Civil Constitution of the Clergy said that the Pope's authority over the bishops and the clergymen of France will be only nominal and not real, they became very angry. And as a result, till now, please understand, the lower clergy were supporting the cause of the revolution. Whatever the revolution had stood for, they were supporting that. But once they were asked to sign this document called Civil Constitution of the Clergy, they became against the revolution. The lower clergy began to work against the revolution, whatever the revolution had stood for. Did you understand here? Suspensive veto is Ramandeep. Suspensive veto is the legislative assembly will pass a bill and it will go to the king for his signature. For the president, no, it will go to the king for his signature. Now the king can resend the bill once for the reconsideration of the legislative assembly. Right? If the king wants to make some changes, he can make only suggestions to the legislative assembly. But let us say the legislative assembly, without making any changes, repasses the same bill back to the king. The king is bound to append his signature. He has to put his signature. So he can only delay the execution of the law. He can maybe for a few days or a few weeks delay signing that particular bill. Okay, he can only sit on that bill for some time, but ultimately he has to sign it and send it, and that becomes a law. That's called suspensive veto. He cannot alter or change the character of that bill. He doesn't have that right. He can only delay the execution of the bill by delaying his signature. That is called suspensive veto, right? Yeah. I'll again tell you. Third point is what, Nikhil, can you be specific, Nikhil? Ankita is telling, please tell why lower clergy. Okay, lower clergy, I told you, till now, the lower clergy were supporting the revolution, whatever the revolution had stood for. They were one of the frustrated and disgruntled elements of French society, because all the burden of running the affairs of the church fell upon the lower clergy. And they were also paid very nominal amount of salaries. Now, the lower clergy looked up to the Pope as their guide, as their father figure, because the Pope is considered to be the representative of Lord Jesus Christ on this earth. Now, when the civil constitution of the clergy said that the Pope's authority over the clergy people of France will only be nominal, the lower clergy did not like it. They wanted the Pope to be guiding them and his powers to be real, not nominal. And that is the reason why they became against the revolution. Did you understand? Did Louis the 16th, not 6th, Louis the 16th, Dheeraj, accept the National Assembly? Of course, I told you. After the fall of the Bastille, what happened? You have peasant revolts breaking out all over the country. You have a parallel government called the municipal government established. A National Guard was established. So Louis had no choice but to recognize the Estates General as the National Assembly. And the National Assembly was the one which brought the Constitution of 1791. Clear? All of you? Did you get me that? Clear? Very easy actually. You go back and revise and maybe listen to the lecture once again, once or twice, and then you're good to go. Okay, great. Now look here. Let us now analyze this. What are the merits of the National Assembly? What are the merits of the National Assembly? It destroyed absolute monarchy. Please add that, please. It destroyed absolute monarchy. It destroyed absolute monarchy and replaced absolute monarchy with what? Can the class answer my question? It destroyed absolute monarchy and replaced absolute monarchy with what? No, not democracy. Constitutional monarchy. Constitutional monarchy. What is constitutional monarchy? Hello? Like it exists in England. You have a monarch in England, but who is supreme in England? Parliament is supreme. Here also you have a parliament which came into existence, isn't it? The National Assembly is a parliament, isn't it? Legislature, executive, judiciary were separated. It's a parliament. And king is there, but the king's powers have been clipped off. So the king's powers have been drastically reduced. So France transitioned from an absolute monarchy into a constitutional monarchy. Okay, so here it destroyed absolute monarchy and replaced that with constitutional monarchy. Please make a note in your notes. Then it destroyed feudalism. We have seen this. It destroyed feudalism, serfdom, and forced labor. It destroyed the old administration and established a new order. So it destroyed the old administration and established a new order based on the sovereign will of the people. People became supreme in France and separation of powers. So a new order based on the sovereign will of the people and on the basis of theory of separation of powers, SOP in short, separation of powers. So they introduced separation of powers. Legislature, executive, judiciary became separate. Revolutionary changes were brought about in the judiciary and the church. We have seen this. Nobility of the robe was abolished. Judges were to be elected by the people, paid by the state, and they'll be in office between 2 to 4 years. And jury system was introduced. So revolutionary changes in the judiciary. Church lost all its property, and the number of bishops were reduced, right? And the Pope's authority over the clergy became nominal. And all the church people had to sign this document called Civil Constitution of the Clergy. So revolutionary changes in the judiciary and the church. And the most important merit is the Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen. Each and every citizen of France, his freedom, his rights, his that was safeguarded through this document called Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen. These are the merits. Clear? Very easy. So what about it, Amarnath? Can you? Yeah, that is true. 1787. It came into existence in 1787. Yeah, and the Bill of Rights came into existence in 1789 in America. So what's your question, Hari? Ketan, don't worry. You focus on the class. We'll talk about it later. At the end of the session, last 5 minutes, we'll discuss about these things. Right? Okay. So these are the merits. Now let us look at the demerits. Look at the demerits. Number one, it stopped short of full democracy. Why? It stopped short of full democracy. Everybody was not given voting rights. Okay. Everybody was not given voting rights. Only those people who had property with them and paid taxes to the government were given voting rights. So major sections of the French society were denied franchise. So this was one of the demerits. So you can also say it was the monopoly of the middle classes. The middle classes dominated the National Assembly. They secured their own interests at the cost of the masses. The middle classes secured their own interests at the cost of the masses. Majority of the commoners of France did not have property. So automatically they were denied voting rights. This is number one demerit. Second is there was no cooperation nor coordination between the executive and the legislative assembly. Who was the executive head? The king was the executive head, and the legislature was in the hands of the legislative assembly. Both of them looked at each other with suspicion. Please understand, Louis had lost all his powers. He was only having suspensive veto. He was the executive head, but he had lost all his powers. So he was not liking this new a new state of affairs. At the same time, the Legislative Assembly looked at the king with suspicion, and the king looked at the legislative with suspicion. So there was no cooperation nor coordination between the executive authority in the form of the king and the legislature in the form of the Legislative Assembly. And lastly, further, it led to religious disorders and civil war. The confiscation of church property hurt the religious sentiments of the people. So they were used to going to the church. So the church doors have been locked up, right? And all the property of the church has been taken away. The Pope's authority has been made nominal over the clergy. So this shocked the religious conscience of the people, and that led to religious disorder and civil wars. And lastly, the overprinting of assignats led to inflation. So it did solve the financial problem of France to a large extent. It improved the financial condition, the printing of assignats or paper currency, but overprinting of assignats led to inflation. Ankita, I've already told you, active citizens were those who had property with them and paid taxes to the government. And isn't it? And and passive were those who did not have property, and therefore they could not vote or have franchise. First point of demerits, Nikhil, it stopped short of full democracy. I told you only active citizens could vote. Passive citizens denied voting rights because they had no property. You see, when we became independent, when India became independent, our leaders also contemplated and discussed about whether franchise voting rights should be given to all sections of Indian society, whether they're even if they're uneducated or educated, should be given to everybody, including the uneducated. And they decided to give it to everybody, whether they had property or whether they were educated or not. They gave voting rights to everybody. And on hindsight, we know that they were very, very right. Somebody may be uneducated, but he has got a lot of common sense. And the masses in India, the rural people, they have a lot of common sense. Okay, so this is about the merits and demerits of the National Assembly. Now let us look at the limitations of the Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen. Let us look at the limitations. Yeah, of course, Jaswant, it does have, I suppose it does have adult franchise now in France. It does have. Okay, what are the limitations of the Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen? Number one, gender equality was absent. The Declaration of the Rights of Man spoke about only man, that is males. It did not speak about females. So gender equality was absent in the Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen. That is number one. The fundamental right to property was pro-rich. Everybody was not given voting rights. Okay, and they said everybody has fundamental right to property, but then it only benefited the richer classes, not the poorer sections. They did not have property. Similarly, you have no emphasis on the fundamental right to vote. Everybody did not have voting rights. Only the rich, only those who had property and paid taxes had voting rights. So that's another demerit. And of course, equal protection of the law was also absent because equal protection of the law was also absent. These are some of the demerits of the Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen. Are you there with me? So gender equality was absent. Fundamental right to property was pro-rich. Then fundamental right to vote was absent, and of course, you have equal protection of the law was absent. These are the limitations of the Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen. Clear? Now, okay. Now let us move on to the further development of the French Revolution. We have to look at it. I'll again repeat what happened. The financial situation was very, very grave. Louis, with no choice, decided to call a meeting of the Estates General. I'm recapping whatever I have done till now. The last part I'm recapping. So the financial situation was very, very serious. He tried to tax the privileged classes, but the Assembly of Notables did not give him permission. Then he called a meeting of the Parliament of Paris, asked them permission to borrow extra loans from foreign countries. They also denied him permission to do that. And as a result, the situation was getting from bad to worse, the financial situation. And a desperate Louis decided to call a meeting of the Estates General. And the summoning of the Estates General is said to mark the beginning of the French Revolution. The Estates General had met 175 years back. Therefore, it had to be reconstituted before he called a meeting of the Estates General. And he ordered Necker to reconstitute the Estates General. Having reconstituted the Estates General, Louis fixed May the 5th, 1789 as the date on which the meeting of the Estates General would be held. On the eve of the Estates General's meeting, the members of the Third Estate demanded three things from Louis. Number one, that has the Estates General represents national problems and it consists of representative of all sections of French society. It should be renamed as National Assembly. Number two, voting by individuals should be introduced and it should be recognized as a single-chambered body. It should be declared as a single-chambered body. Now, if these demands of the Third Estate were implemented, it would have adversely affected the members of the privileged classes. And therefore, they, through Maria, got the meeting cancelled. When the meeting was cancelled, you have the members of the Third Estate meeting in the nearby tennis court and taking an oath, right? And they said that they will not go home until these demands of theirs are met by Louis. That resulted in Louis calling a section of the French army and trying to forcefully put down the members of the Third Estate. That resulted in the fall of the Bastille. The fall of the Bastille led to the birth of the National Assembly, where the Estates General was renamed as National Assembly and Louis recognized that particular body. The National Assembly brought out a constitutional document for France called the Constitution of 1791. It brought about drastic changes in the administration. The theory of separation of powers of Montesquieu was implemented, and it brought about reforms in the administration, in the judiciary, in the religious sector also. And we have merits and demerits we have discussed. This is about whatever we have done till now. Clear, all of you? Okay, good. Ankita, representative in the National Assembly were whom? Ankita, Estates General has renamed itself as National Assembly, right? Then you have a legislative body, an executive body, a judiciary, changes in the administration. All these things were brought about by the National Assembly. They were on the streets, Satyapal. How the commoners came to know about the army? They were on the streets of Paris searching for food, bread. And when a section of the French army came to put down the members of the Third Estate, they understood why Louis had called them, why Louis had summoned a section of the French army. And that's why fighting broke out. Didn't understand 175 years. It had met Chavan, the Estates General had met 175 years back in 1614. That was the last meeting of the Estates General. So it had to be reconstituted, re-elected before a fresh meeting is called. And after getting it re-elected from Necker or reconstituting the Estates General, he called a meeting after 175 years. Okay, now I move on. Now let us look at the National Convention. Let us look at the National Convention and what are the circumstances which brought the National Convention to power. So National Assembly was followed by the National Convention. And we will analyze both these bodies later. What is the difference between these two bodies? What was the agenda of the National Convention, etc. We will discuss it later. That will be the analytical part of this topic. We are discussing the factual topic now, the factual part of this topic. We'll analyze it later. Because without facts, you cannot analyze, right? So we are discussing only the factual part now. We'll come back here. National Convention. Now look here on your screen. The Legislative Assembly, which was the lawmaking body under the National Assembly, isn't it? The Legislative Assembly, the legislative wing. How many members were there in the Legislative Assembly? 745 members. There were 745 members, isn't it? Now, among the Legislative Assembly, there were some group, one group of people who were believing in constitutionalism. They wanted France to be a constitutional monarchy. They are called constitutionalists. So they wanted France to be a constitutional monarchy. Like, for example, what was there in England? Constitutional monarchy. They wanted France to be a constitutional monarchy where the parliament is supreme. The king is there, but he doesn't have any real powers. And of course, France already had become a constitutional monarchy under the National Assembly. So these are the constitutionalists who were supporters of constitutional monarchy. And then you have another section within the Legislative Assembly who were the Republicans. They wanted France to become a republic. Now, what's a republic? The head of the state is elected. There's no kingship, there's no monarchy. The head of the state is elected, the president is elected. So they wanted to get rid of monarchy, these Republicans, and declare France a republic. These are the Republicans. And among the Republicans, there were two groups of people, the Jacobins and the Girondists. The Jacobins and the Girondists. Now, who are the Jacobins? These are the extreme Republicans. They are the extreme Republicans. They wanted France to be a republic immediately by overthrowing monarchy. They wanted to get rid of monarchy altogether and immediately declare France a republic, if necessary by violence. If it is necessary to use violence, so be it. We want France to become a republic immediately. These are the Jacobins, the extreme Republicans. And then we have the Girondists, the moderate Republicans. These Girondists also wanted France to be a republic, but slowly, gradually, okay, over a period of time, not immediately, but gradually. These are the Jacobins and the Girondists. Patan, I told you, constitutional monarchy, the constitutionalists, they wanted the existence of a monarch, but with a parliament. The real power is in the hands of a parliament in a constitutional monarchy. And the king is only a figurehead. He doesn't have real powers. Whereas in a republican is what? The head of the state is elected. And there's no monarchy in a republic. Right? That's the difference. Now we'll come back here. On your screen, a rumor was spread. Understand this, please. A rumor was in the air that there was a lot of food stored in the royal palace at Versailles by Maria Antoinette. You see here, this is the royal palace at Versailles. This is the official residence of the Bourbon kings of France. I'm sorry, the Bourbon monarchs of France. The palace of Versailles. This is the palace of Versailles. I put a picture of the palace of Versailles. This was their official residence. And a rumor was spread that Maria Antoinette, the queen, had stored a lot of food in the Versailles palace. Now, this rumor was among the people. It had spread among the people of France, of Paris. And the women of Paris, you see on your screen, the women of Paris, they came to believe this rumor because they were hungry, their children were hungry, their husbands were hungry. So what they did is the women, they took up they took hold of all their kitchen utensils, whatever big utensils they could convert it into a weapon, the big spoons and all those things. They took that, and along with their husbands' weapons, many of their husbands were soldiers and officers in the army, so they took their husbands' spears and swords, etc., and they marched en masse. All the women of Paris marched to the Versailles Palace. So you can see here on your screen, October the 5th, 6th, 1789, Women's March on Versailles. So all the women of Paris, the hungry women, they marched with their husbands' weapons and their own kitchen utensils. They entered the Versailles Palace. What did they do? They manhandled the royal family. They caught hold of Louis's shirt, collar. They shook him up, the women, the ladies, right? And they also beat up Maria, manhandled her. And they began to search for the food which they thought had been stored by Maria. They did not find any food. It was a rumor. They did not find any food in the palace, stored in the palace. Either way, they dragged Louis and Maria out of the palace because they were blaming the royal family for their plight. They were hungry, starving. So they dragged the royal family out of the Versailles palace and they took them to the Paris palace. There was another palace. There was another palace at Paris called the Tuileries Palace. This is the Tuileries Palace. So from the Versailles Palace, they dragged them to the Tuileries Palace, and the royal family came to reside in the Tuileries Palace. Right. So this is one development. Now, when Louis was in the Tuileries Palace, two documents were presented to him by the Legislative Assembly for his signature. These two documents are the Civil Constitution of the Clergy. We have already discussed this, Civil Constitution of the Clergy. And then the Law of the Emigres. So two documents were presented to Louis while he was staying in the Tuileries Palace at Paris for his signature by the Legislative Assembly. Now, what is this Law of Emigres? Now, emigres emigres were those people who were pro-monarchy. They were for monarchy. So they were the traditional aristocratic families of France, the aristocracy, right? And the recognized supporters of monarchy. They were all pro-monarchy. Looking at the momentous and revolutionary changes which had happened in France since the fall of the Bastille, many of these emigrants had run away to neighboring countries like Austria. So they had run away to neighboring countries like Austria and they had taken shelter there. So you see, the king had lost his powers, right? And the feudal lords had lost their privileges. The church the church also had been undermined. The church property had been confiscated. So they were all the members of the privileged classes, and they were all pro-monarchy. They were for the king, for the monarchy. So many of them had got scared as to what would happen to them, and therefore they had run away to neighboring countries like Austria, and they had taken shelter there. Now, what is this law of emigres? These emigres were asked to come back within a particular date by the National Assembly, by the Legislative Assembly. The National Assembly has told them, you come back to France within a particular date. If you don't come back, if you don't return, then what will the government do? The National Assembly will do. Their properties will be confiscated. Their families will be arrested and they will be declared as traitors. The emigres will be declared as traitors. Did you understand? This is called the law of the emigres. So here the emigres were asked to come back to France by a particular date. They were asked to come back to France by a particular date. Then, if they did not turn up, they did not come back to France, then what will happen? Their property will be confiscated by the government, right? Then their families will be arrested. Their families will be arrested and they will be declared as traitors. That is Deshadrohi, right? They will be declared as traitors. Now, Louis was given these two documents for his signature. Now, instead of signing immediately, that's what they expected, the members of the Legislative Assembly. Louis expressed his suspensive veto. He expressed his suspensive veto. The people of Paris became very, very angry with their emperor. Now, please understand who had given that power to him. The Constitution of 1791 had given that power to Louis, and he expressed that power, which was there given to him in his hands. But then, nevertheless, the people of Paris became very, very angry with Louis. They attacked the Tuileries Palace. Now, look here, they attacked the Tuileries Palace. Earlier, the women had dragged him from the Versailles Palace to the Tuileries Palace, and the royal family was staying in the Tuileries Palace at Paris. Now, when he did not sign these two documents and he expressed a suspensive veto, you have the people of Paris attacking the Tuileries Palace. Now, Louis, after being manhandled by the women of Paris, had become a little smart. What he had done is, he had hired about 700 Swiss bodyguards. He had hired 700 Swiss bodyguards to give him protection. Switzerland bodyguards, Swiss bodyguards. So again, if the women turn up, they might again manhandle the royal family and his children and wife. Therefore, he had hired 700 Swiss bodyguards to give protection to the royal family. So here, when the people rush to the Tuileries Palace, you have these Swiss bodyguards trying to stop them. The people of Paris butchered those 700 Swiss bodyguards. They killed them. And then a frightened Louis and his family ran out of the Tuileries Palace and they took shelter in the Legislative Assembly. They took shelter in the Legislative Assembly, where Legislative Assembly had 745 members. So they took shelter in the Legislative Assembly. It's like running to the Parliament of India, and hiding in the Parliament of India, in the building, in the Parliament building. That's what happened. So from the Versailles Palace, they had been taken to the Tuileries Palace. Now from the Tuileries Palace, the royal family was forced to take refuge in the Legislative Assembly building. Right? I stop here before we go for a break. Any doubts still here? All of you clear? Mina, ask me the question because it scrolls down as people keep asking doubts or giving their comments. What happens is I might have not noticed your question and it goes up. I wouldn't have been able to see, I wouldn't have seen your question. So it scrolls up and I would not know your question. Okay, we go for a break now. So can we go for a break and come back? So now it is 6:35. We meet at what time? Can we meet at 6 what time shall we meet? 6:35. Okay, 6:50. Okay, 6:50. Yeah, come back. 6:50 we meet. 6:50 we meet and continue the story. Are you enjoying the story? There's more masala to happen. Come. Very nice things are there. Don't miss it. It's very interesting because UPSC has asked questions also from French Revolution, right? So the masala part will come later. You come back, at 6:50. Yeah, it's a very interesting topic. Enjoyable. Good evening once again. Can we continue our story of the French Revolution? Am I audible and visible? All of you are back? Serfdom, Gaurav, serfdom is the lowest category of farmer. He was like a bonded laborer. He would live on the land of the lord, and the boarding lodging facilities were taken care by the lord. So that is a serf, virtually a bonded laborer. Okay, let's continue our story of the French Revolution. So here I told you we are looking at um, we were looking at how the National Convention replaced the National Assembly. Now, within the Legislative Assembly, which consisted of 745 members, there were two groups of people. One group believed in that France should become a constitutional monarchy, or it should remain a constitutional monarchy. That these were the constitutionalists. And then another group wanted France to become a republic by getting rid of monarchy. And among the Republicans, there were two groups. One were the Jacobins, that is the extreme Republicans who wanted France to be a republic immediately, if necessary by violence. And then the other end, we have the Girondists, who were moderate Republicans who wanted France to be a republic gradually. Now, we have a rumor spread that there was a lot of food stored in the palace of Versailles by Maria Antoinette, the queen, and therefore the women of Paris marched to the Versailles palace. They manhandled the royal family. They searched for the supposed food, but they did not find any. And they dragged the royal family out of the Versailles palace and took them to the Tuileries palace. When Louis was living in the Tuileries palace, two documents were given to him for his signature. One was the civil constitution of the clergy, and the other is the law of emigres. But Louis did not immediately sign these two documents. He expressed his suspensive veto. That resulted in the people of Paris attacking the Tuileries Palace. They butchered all these 700 Swiss bodyguards who had been hired for his protection by Louis. And the royal family, a frightened royal family, ran away from the Tuileries Palace and took shelter in the Legislative Assembly. So this is where I stopped before we went for a break. Now let me continue the story. Now, the way the royal family was being treated resulted in Louis deciding to escape into Austria. Now, please understand, Maria Antoinette was the Princess of Austria, and her brother. So you have one after another. Actually, we have her brother Joseph II. You can see here on the screen, Joseph II. All these three were her brothers, one after another. Joseph II died. Then we have Leopold II, who became the Emperor of Austria. Following Leopold II, Francis II became the Emperor of Austria. Now, looking at the way the royal family was being treated, the French royal family was being treated, Maria used to write letters to our brothers, asking for their assistance, asking for his assistance to the French royal family. Now, what happened is, um, since Louis had lost all his powers and he had been, he was being treated like a criminal by the people of France, from the Versailles Palace to the Tuileries Palace, and from there being driven away to the Legislative Assembly out of desperation. The royal family had to take shelter there. The royal family decided to escape into Austria. So what happened is, the royal family one night they disguised themselves. This was on the night of June the 20th, 21st, 1791. So the royal family disguised themselves. Maria, uh, she herself put on a disguise. She also disguised her children, and including Louis the 16th. Then they sat in the royal carriage, the royal chariot, the emperor's chariot. You can see here on your screen. And in the dead of the night, in the middle of the night, the royal family began to speedily ride towards the Austrian Netherlands border. So you have a part of Netherlands which was under the control of Austria, and from there, from Austrian Netherlands, they wanted to land up in Austria. Right. This was the plan of Louis the 16th and his family. So you can see here on your screen, this is the route taken by the royal family. From Paris, they set off in the dead of the night, and they traveled all the way to a place called Vans. Yeah, Vans. Now, they were just about 20 miles away from the Austrian border, from crossing into the Austrian border. This was in the dead of the night, mind you. So they are speedily riding towards the Austrian border in the dead of the night, and the chariot, the royal carriage, comes and stops at the main gate of Vans. There was a town called Vans, and the main gate had been closed. So the carriage had to pass through the main gate. Once the main gate is opened, then they will pass through the main gate of Vans, and then they can travel further into Austria and cross into the Austrian territory. And they were just about 20 kilometers away from the Austrian border. Now, when the royal carriage comes and stops at Vans, the prefect of Vans, he was the head of Vans, the administrative head, he was on his night rounds. So in the nights, you have police, they go for a round, they take their rounds and see whether everything is okay. If there's any suspicious activity, they'll question the people, etc., etc. So that happens every day, even here in India, in every city and town, isn't it? So the prefect was on his night rounds, and he saw this carriage, which was a beautiful carriage, right? It was the emperor's carriage, and he was surprised at the way the carriage was looking, and he was wondering who is the owner of this carriage. So he walked up towards the carriage and he peeped in. He peeped into the carriage. Though Louis and his family was in disguise, he was able to recognize Louis the 16th. And the prefect ordered the arrest of Louis and his family, and the gate were ordered not to be opened. So you can see here the royal family is arrested. You can see it to the left of your screen. The royal family is being arrested, right? At once, and they are brought back to Paris. They're brought back to Paris. So he came back to Paris 4 days later, June the 25th. Now, please understand, the attempt of Louis and his family to escape into Austria spread like wildfire throughout France. And the whole of France came to know that their emperor was trying to escape into Austria. Now, they began to wonder why. Everybody would began to wonder why was he trying to escape into Austria? What was his intention? And among the people, there'll be some people who will have extra brains, smart fellows. And these people, the wise people, they thought that probably he wanted to escape into Austria to take the help of his brother-in-law, the king of Austria, that is Maria's brother, take an army from Austria, then attack France, put down the revolutionaries, and come back on the throne of France with full authority. So that's what they suspected of Louis having, trying to do. Probably he wanted to go to Austria, take the help of the Austrian monarch, the brother of Maria, take an army, wage war against his own people, put down the revolutionaries, that is the National Assembly, and come back on the throne of France with full authority. That's what they suspected Louis, attempting to have done. But then this was a failure because he could not escape into Austria. But then there was no proof. This was just this is what they thought. Probably that's what was his intention. But there was no proof whether that was his real intention or not. So they just kept quiet. Now what happened? We have two countries declaring war against France. Two countries declaring war against France. That is Austria and Prussia. Two countries, Austria and Prussia, declared war against France at this point in time. Now, Austrian monarch had a personal reason to declare war against France because the king of Austria's sister was Maria. So he wanted to help Maria and his brother-in-law, that is Louis the 16th. And we have Prussia, another kingdom, that is the biggest of the German-speaking states during those days. There was no Germany as such. So within the German-speaking areas, you have a big kingdom called Prussia. So Austria and Prussia joined together and declared war against France. And around this time, we have what is known as the Declaration of Pillnitz, issued by the King of Austria and Prussia. What is called the Declaration of Pillnitz? Through this Declaration of Pillnitz, they said, the kings of Austria and Prussia are calling upon other European countries to restore the monarchy in France. They are saying, that entire Europe, all the kings of Europe should support Austria and Prussia also in restoring Louis back on the throne of France. That's called the Declaration of Pillnitz. That is, it is in the interest of Europe to bring back Louis on the throne of France with full authority. Now, you please understand, why did Austria and Prussia, declare war against France? You see, what had the people of France done within their country? They had seized power. No, they had reduced Louis the 16th to a figurehead, and they had stripped him of his powers, and they had established a constitutional monarchy. And throughout Europe, you have absolutism. Absolute monarchies existed throughout Europe, and those people also, those kings also in other parts of Europe, had not taken care of their people properly. They had exploited them in various ways. Now, France might set a precedent to the whole of Europe. People within other European countries might take the French example. They might also revolt against their kings and establish constitutional monarchies. They did not want that to happen within their own boundaries. So they wanted to restore the monarchy in France with full authority. Did you understand? Can you raise your hands? Did you catch me here, all of you? So here, this is the Declaration of Pillnitz, where they said, the kings of Austria and Prussia, that the entire Europe is interested in restoring the French monarch on his throne with full authority. And on the eve of this war against France, the Austro-Prussian commander in chief, his name was the Duke of Brunswick. He was the commander of the Austro-Prussian forces. He made a declaration that is called Brunswick's Declaration or Brunswick's Manifesto. What is this Brunswick's Manifesto or Brunswick's Declaration? He said the reason why Austria and Prussia have declared war against France is to bring back Louis on the throne of France with full authority. Did you understand? Why are we fighting against France? Why have we declared war against France? To bring back Louis on the throne of France with full authority. That is why we are fighting this war against France. This is the statement given by Duke of Brunswick. That's called Brunswick's Manifesto or Brunswick's Declaration. Now, please understand, I told you, when Louis tried to escape into Austria with his family, people, some of them within France, suspected that probably he wanted to take the help of the Austrian monarch, his brother-in-law, and wage war against his own people, the people of France, and put down the revolutionaries and come back on the throne of France with full authority. That's what they suspected of Louis trying to do, but they had no proof. Now, with Brunswick's declaration, whatever doubt they had about Louis became confirmed. Did you understand that the doubt got confirmed? Maine bola tha na, this is what he was trying to do. So here, the people of France were very, very angry with their king. That is a time when we have a revolt in Paris. So Duke of Brunswick makes a declaration, right? He makes a declaration, and that they want to bring back Louis on the throne of France with full authority. That's why they're fighting against France. And what happened in this war? So Austria and Prussia joined together and defeated France. So when a war happens, it happens on the border, isn't it? Let's say there's a war between India and Pakistan. It will happen on the border. Similarly, you have this war happening on the French border. Austria and Prussia combinedly defeated France. And then you have the French, you have the Austro-Prussian forces setting their foot on the soil of France. And they were speedily marching towards Paris to fulfill their aim. What was their aim? To restore Louis on the throne of France with full authority. Now, once the Duke of Brunswick made his declaration, there was a revolt in Paris. There was a revolt in Paris, and one of the Jacobin leaders by name Georges Danton, he seized power in his hands. Okay, there was a revolt in Paris. Georges Danton, one of the Jacobin leaders, seized power in his hands. He called for the dissolution of the National Assembly. He said, dissolve the National Assembly and call for an election to the National Convention. You call an election to the National Convention. So the National Assembly was dissolved, and they made preparations to establish another body called the National Convention. Now, you have the Austro-Prussian army having defeated the French army on the border. They have entered the territory of France and they are speedily marching towards Paris, the Austro-Prussian army, to put Louis back on the throne of France with full authority. Now, the people of France, the people of Paris and France came to know that their army had been defeated at the border and they became very angry with their king. They thought their king Louis is complicit in this defeat. He must have done something that our army has got defeated. They did not blame their own lack of preparation. Either way, they took up whatever they could make it into a weapon. They picked up whatever they could make it into a weapon. So, with improvised weapons, right? So they took a stick or a rod or whatever. They broke up some furniture and took the metal out of it. And then they made it into a weapon. These are the hungry, starving millions. The ragged, rugged, barefooted. They had no slippers or shoes to wear. They had no enough clothes on their bodies. They had no enough food in their bellies. But once they came to know that Austro-Prussian forces have entered their territory, they were oozing with a lot of anger and patriotism, nationalism, nationalist feelings. Their bodies were oozing with a lot of patriotic and nationalist feelings, love towards their mother country, their love towards their own country, and they moved in the direction these hungry masses, starving millions, right? The mob, it's like a mob. They are marching towards the direction in which the Austro-Prussian army is marching towards Paris. And at a place called Valmy, you can see here, at a place called Valmy, a fierce battle was fought between the trained armies of Austria and Prussia. These are the trained armies of Austria and Prussia fighting against the common people of France. And the common people had all sorts of wonderful weapons, which the army people had never seen, stones and sticks and rods and whatnot. And what did the people of France do? They butchered the Austro-Prussian forces. It was a thrilling victory scored by France. And the news of the victory scored by the people of France against the Austro-Prussian forces spread like wildfire throughout France, and there was a national jubilation. They were celebrating this grand victory, like the way we are celebrating our victory over, South Africa in the finals of cricket 2020. Right? So there was a national hysteria, a happiness that they were able to defeat the Austro-Prussian forces. And these are the circumstances which brought the National Convention to power. By this time, National Convention had come to power. So did you understand? These are the circumstances which brought the National Convention to power. Clear? Duke of Brunswick, Ankita, that is Duke of Brunswick's declaration or manifesto, he said that the reason why Austria and Prussia are fighting France is to bring back Louis on the throne of France with full authority, right? That is the reason why they are fighting this war against France, to bring back the French monarch with full authority on his throne. That resulted in a commotion in Paris, a revolt in Paris. And one of the Jacobin leaders, Georges Danton, seized power in his hands. He called for the dissolution of the National Assembly and the election to a national convention. And then happened the Battle of Valmy, where the common people of France were able to defeat the Austro-Prussian forces, right? And by this time, the National Convention had come to power. So you see here on your screen, this is the National Convention which comes to power. Now, Austro-Prussian forces. He was, the Duke of Brunswick. Basically, he was a Prussian by blood. Yeah. Did you get me that, Ankita? So, Austro-Prussian forces. Now, the National Convention comes to power. And this National Convention was in existence from 1792 to 95. You can see here. So, National Assembly was dissolved, and in place of National Assembly, we have a National Convention which comes into existence. Now, what did the National Convention do? The first thing the National Convention did is it declared France as a republic. So the monarchy came to an end. Monarchy came to an end. Earlier, we had a constitutional monarchy under the National Assembly. Now you have end of monarchy, and France became a republic for the first time. This is called the First French Republic. Why do we call it as the First French Republic? Because many times in its history, France transitioned from a republic to a monarchy, then again to a republic, then again to a monarchy. At least 3 times this happened. where she became a republic from a monarchy, then again a monarchy, then again a republic, then again a monarchy, then again a republic. So that's why it's called First French Republic. So on 21st September 1792, France was declared a republic. Now, the first task before the National Convention was to decide what to do with their king. Their king was now a declared traitor. Louis had tried to escape into Austria, right? And the accusation against Louis was that he was trying to wage war against his own people by taking the help of the Austrian government. Therefore, the Jacobins called for the blood of the king. Jacobins said, kill that fellow, kill that king, because he has tried to harm his own people by wanting to wage war against his own people. So Jacobins called for the blood of the king, kill him immediately. The Girondists pleaded for leniency. They said, he is our king. You cannot treat him like that, right? Therefore, you spare him. This is what the Girondists were telling. Jacobins wanting to kill the king, Girondists wanting to spare the king. Ultimately, the issue was decided through an election. Okay, whether to kill the king or to spare the king. Who are the people who are electing? Jacobins and Girondists. And did you get me that? So they are voting to decide whether to kill the king or to spare the king. And by just a narrow margin of one vote, just by one vote, the Jacobins won this election. And it was decided to kill the king. Dheeraj, Jacobins are the extreme Republicans, isn't it? Extreme Republicans. They wanted France to become a republic immediately. Okay, did you get me that? So here elections take place, and the Jacobins won by a narrow majority, and it was decided to kill the king. Now look here, understand this, please. Now understand this. Now look here. There was a doctor. Understand this, please. There was a French doctor by name Joseph Guillotine. He was a medical doctor. Joseph Guillotine. His name was Joseph Guillotine. Now, this Joseph Guillotine, French medical doctor, had devised an apparatus, a machine, which will kill a human being with the least fuss. How to kill a human being with the least problem, with the least fuss, right? So he had devised one machine or an apparatus, and it looked like this. You see here on your screen, this is the apparatus on your screen. There's a wooden frame. You can see this is the wooden frame, and there's a sword hanging on top. The person who is supposed to be killed will be made to lie with his hands and legs tied underneath this particular wooden frame. You can see here the head is this side and the body is here. The body is here and the head is here, right? And then the signal is given, and that particular blade, a heavy iron blade, will fall with a thud on the person's neck, severing the neck from the body. This is called guillotining. This is called guillotining. It was decided to now guillotine Louis. It was decided to guillotine Louis, right? This is called guillotining. Now, Louis was brought to that square of the revolution. That is a square, or the what you call a choke, where four roads meet, or three or four roads meet. So he was brought to that particular area, where the arena where that apparatus was placed. And Louis, as is the norm even nowadays, was asked to say his final words. Even now, before a person is hanged to death, he's asked to say his final words or final wish, whatever it is. So Louis was asked to say his final words. And what did he say? The Emperor, Louis the 16th, did speak with a lot of confidence, without any fright, and he spoke like a true emperor. These are the last words of Louis XVI on your screen. Gentlemen, I'm innocent, for that of which I'm accused. May my blood assure the happiness of the French. This is what the Emperor Louis XVI is supposed to have spoken. Gentlemen, I'm innocent, for that of which I'm accused. May my blood assure the happiness of the French. And he went and lay down himself under that particular wooden frame. The 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 blade fell on his neck, severing his body from his head. And one of the Jacobin leaders, Danton, picked up his head like a coconut, and he showed it to everybody. He showed it to everybody, right? You can see here, people are seeing the severed head um, of uh, of Louis the 16th. Sorry, Marat. This is Marat for you. Marat picked up one of his one the picked up the head of Louis the 16th and showed it to the gathering there, the crowd who had gathered there. Are you there with me, all of you? Now what happened? So Louis has been guillotined, right? Now suddenly what happened? Louis has been killed. Suddenly there was a wave of sympathy for the emperor. Till now they were hooting for the blood of the emperor. Once the emperor was killed, suddenly there was a wave of sympathy for the emperor, and the people began to say, the Jacobins have killed the emperor. Kill the Jacobins. This is the slogan, right? There was a wave of sympathy for him. And please understand, when the revolution began, what was the aim of the French Revolution? The aims of the middle class also was the aim of the French Revolution. They never wanted to kill their king, isn't it? They never wanted to kill their emperor. But events had so transpired that the revolution had gone out of control. They did not know how to stop the course of events. It had gone out of control, and in the process, Louis happened to be guillotined. Now, there was a civil war within France where the people have declared the Jacobins as the murderers of their king, and therefore the Jacobins have to be killed. So within France, there's a disorder, a civil war. And simultaneously, now 6 countries declared war against France. Earlier, it was Austria and Prussia who had declared war against France and had defeated French army on the border. Now you have England, Spain, Holland, Sardinia. 6 countries declared war against France. And this was a very, very serious situation which the country of France had to face. Internal disorder, and people are against the Jacobins, who are the main people in the National Convention. National Convention had come to power and it was dominated by the Jacobins. And here the people are against the Jacobins suddenly because they have killed the king. And then you have 6 countries declaring war against France. And the very survival of France was at stake at this point in time. And something had to be done very, very soon to restore order within France because before those external enemies are tackled. And therefore, we have the National Convention bringing into existence what is known as the Reign of Terror. You see here on your screen, the Reign of Terror. The Reign of Terror. What is this Reign of Terror? This was the period where you have terrorist methods used by the Jacobins to bring order within France. It was necessary. It was necessary for them to do that because France was facing a very serious crisis. 6 countries have declared war. Imagine, you take a hypothetical example. Within India, let us say there is a civil war going on, and 6 countries around India, like China, Pakistan, etc., have declared war against this country. Now, what will you do at that point in time as a citizen of this country? This is what the French people were facing at that point in time. 6 countries declaring war against them simultaneously. And within their country, a civil war is going on. And the government in power, the National Convention, had to restore order within France first. That's what they decided. Let us restore order simultaneously and at the same time tackle the external enemies. So they brought into existence what is called the Reign of Terror. Under this, what happened is you have the Jacobin leaders who were the main people in this Reign of Terror. They were the heads of the Reign of Terror. Like, for example, Georges Danton, Marat, Maximilian Robespierre, Saint Just. These are the main people in this Reign of Terror. Under this Reign of Terror, so what is Reign of Terror? Terrorist methods to restore order within France. That is called Reign of Terror. Under this Reign of Terror, 4 institutes were established. 4 institutes were established under this so-called Reign of Terror. Number 1, Committee of Public Safety. Committee of Public Safety. This consisted of initially 9 members, increased to 12 members. Committee of Public Safety. The most important person in this Committee of Public Safety was Robespierre, Maximilian Robespierre. The Committee of Public Safety made foreign policy and also tried to bring about order within France. And it could even overlook the resolutions passed by the National Convention. So this was the real power in France at this point in time. The Committee of Public Safety initially consisted of 9 members, whose members were now later increased to 12. The main person behind this was Robespierre, and it could even overlook the resolutions passed by the National Convention. This is Committee of Public Safety. Number two is the law of suspects. What is this law of suspects? Anybody suspected of faintly supporting the cause of monarchy was identified and arrested immediately. So anybody suspected of being a pro-monarchy, if he was supporting monarchy or he was speaking in favor of monarchy, would be identified and arrested. So let us say there are two people walking on the streets of Paris, A and B, two friends. Let us say they are walking on the streets of Paris. Okay, two people, and they are telling each other. Let us say A is telling B, Jacobins should not have killed Louis the 16th. What they did was wrong. Let's say that's what A has told B, and somebody hears it. Somebody from the Reign of Terror hears it. A is immediately arrested and he is imprisoned. He is put behind bars. This is the law of suspects. Third, Revolutionary Tribunal. This was an extraordinary criminal court. Those people who were suspected of supporting the cause of monarchy and arrested in the prison, were arrested and imprisoned, would be brought before an extraordinary criminal court called the Revolutionary Tribunal. Summary trials will take place. So the judge will come and sit, and then the accused is brought before the judge. And the judge will ask, what happened? What did this fellow do? Sir, he was speaking like this. He was speaking in favor of monarchy. So what will the judge do? He will give punishment. And what was the punishment generally? Guillotine. That was the punishment. So generally, the punishment was guillotine. So Revolutionary Tribunal was an extraordinary criminal court where the suspects were tried and sentenced. And those who were supposed to be guillotined were brought before the square of the revolution. That is a square. This is the square where that apparatus is hanging with a blade. Okay, this is the blade. And that person is placed under that wooden apparatus, and the blade will come and fall on that person's neck, killing him instantly. This is the square of the revolution. During the Reign of Terror, please understand, every day in various parts of France, minimum 2,000 people were killed per day. They were guillotined per day, 2,000 people. And totally 40,000 people lost their lives during the Reign of Terror, all over France. 40,000 people suspected of supporting the cause of monarchy. And suddenly, the civil war or disorder which the country was facing, suddenly everything became quiet. People are afraid to speak because they could be killed by the Jacobins. And everything became quiet. Simultaneously, when the law of suspects, the Revolutionary Tribunal, and the square of the revolution, when these three were sending suspects to heaven, the Committee of Public Safety ordered conscription. What is conscription? Compulsory military service. So in 1793, we have conscription ordered. Conscription is compulsory military service. 1 million people were identified, shortlisted. 1 million people between the age of 18 and 25 years. Young boys, young able-bodied boys between the age of 18 and 25 were shortlisted. 1 million were shortlisted between the age of 18 to 25, only boys, men. And out of 1 million, that is 10 lakhs, out of 10 lakh, 7 lakh 70,000 were shortlisted. They were selected rather. Out of 10 lakh, 7 lakh 70,000 were recruited. And they were trained as soldiers and officers. Quickly they were trained. They were given a uniform and they were given weapons. And France came to have a national army, a wonderful national army, consisting of only Frenchmen. So this happened simultaneously. The Reign of Terror is trying to bring order within France through those four institutes, simultaneously through a policy of compulsory military service. 10 lakh people were shortlisted, out of which 7 lakh 70,000 were recruited, trained, armed, and uniformed. And France now was ready to defend herself from those 6 countries. Now, among the people who were guillotined, you can see here, among the people who were guillotined was Maria Antoinette. So Maria was guillotined. And also the family of Louis the 16th. The family was also guillotined. Right? Now, out of the 6 countries, why did the family was guillotined? They did not want royalty to come back. They did not want monarchy to be restored in France. The Jacobins, they wanted France to remain a republic. So here, out of 6 countries, 4 countries were defeated by France. 4 countries were defeated. Spain, Prussia, Sardinia, Holland, they all were defeated. Only 2 remained to be tackled. That is England and Austria. You see here, 6 countries declared war. What are the 6 countries? Austria, Prussia, England, Spain, Sardinia, and Holland. Out of these 6, 4 were defeated and only 2 remained to be tackled. Who are the 2 to be tackled? England and Austria remained to be tackled. Others had been defeated. So this way, France was able to enjoy both internal order, both peace internally and externally. And to tackle England and Austria, the National Convention entrusted the responsibility to a remarkable man called Napoleon Bonaparte. So Napoleon Bonaparte was picked up to tackle England and Austria by the National Convention. And we will discuss about Napoleon Bonaparte once I finish with French Revolution. Right? That is part 2 of the French Revolution. Did you understand? So, Gaurav, I will analyze this in some time. Just hold on. We'll come to the difference between National Assembly and National Convention, right? And what was the agenda of the National Convention, and how the Jacobins came to accumulate all powers in their hands. I'll come to that. Just hold on. Have you understood till here? No doubts? Which slide, Nikhil? Which slide you have not understood? This is the royal family. This is the royal family of Louis the 16th and Maria. Yeah, to tackle England and Austria, Akshay, the National Convention entrusted the responsibility to Napoleon Bonaparte. Clear? Garima, last 4 points. What 4 points? We'll come to that. Just hold on. Louis' brothers will come to that. Last 4 point I did not get you. So only England and Austria remained to be tackled. Out of the 6 countries, 4 were defeated by France. Only England and Austria remained to be tackled. And that was entrusted to Napoleon Bonaparte. Okay? That was entrusted to Napoleon Bonaparte. Yeah, the 4th point, the square of the revolution. The square of the revolution, Garima, is that apparatus where that blade was hanging, where the person would be guillotined. So that person will be brought to the square of the revolution, and then the blade will fall on his neck, severing the neck from the body. That is the square of the revolution. Committee of Public Safety consisted of 9 members, later increased to 12 members. Main person was Robespierre in this Committee of Public Safety, and it could even overrule the decisions taken by the National Convention. Law of suspects, I told you. Anybody suspected of supporting monarchy was identified and arrested immediately and imprisoned. Revolution Tribunal was that extraordinary criminal court where the people who had been suspected of supporting monarchy and imprisoned would be trialed. And generally, the punishment meted out to them was guillotine. And every day, 2,000 people were guillotined, minimum. And totally 40,000 people died during the course of the Reign of Terror. The Committee of Public Safety, I've already told you, Chavan. Okay, now let's come back. What did the National Convention do? On your screen, what did the National Convention do? So we have seen the work of the National Assembly. The Estates General renamed itself as National Assembly. National Assembly brought out the Constitution of 1791. And then later the National Assembly was dissolved. Then the National Convention came to power, which declared France as a republic. So what are the other work of the National Convention? Let us understand this. Abolition of monarchy. So monarchy was abolished in France, and France became a republic for the first time. This is the birth of the first French Republic on 21st of September, 1792. Then, through a policy of conscription, what is conscription? Compulsory military service. I've already told you this. Conscription is compulsory military service. The idea of nation in arms was born. through compulsory military service or conscription, the idea of nation in arms was born. What is this nation in arms? You see, as we have seen, there was a disorder within France, a civil war going on in France where the people were angry with the Jacobins. And then 6 countries had declared war against France. So it was necessary for everybody in France, young, old, married, women, children, everybody should participate in defending the country. And that is called the idea of nation in arms. So, what was the order passed by the National Convention during this period? You see here, the young men shall go to the people, the married men shall forge arms and transport provisions. The women shall make tents and clothing and shall serve in the hospitals. The children shall turn linen into lint. The aged shall betake themselves to the public places in order to rouse the courage of the warriors. So it was expected of everybody, young and old alike, irrespective of sex, to help in the defense of the country. Young men shall go to the people, right? That is, the young men will go and fight on the front. Married men shall forge arms, they will make weapons, right? And transport provisions to the soldiers in the front. Married men, right? They will not go for fighting, they will make weapons for the soldiers and transport the food, clothing, provisions to the soldiers fighting at the front. Women shall make tents under which the soldiers have to live and rest, isn't it, on the battlefield. And they'll also make clothes for the soldiers, and they'll serve in the hospitals. They'll serve the wounded, soldiers. Then the children shall turn linen into lint. You have cotton ball which has the seeds. So the children will, with their nimble hands, will separate the cotton seeds from the cotton ball so that they can make threads out of it. And from threads, they can make clothes. They can make a cloth and then clothes out of that. So that is the work of the children. And the aged people, the old people, they cannot fight. So what was expected of the old people? They'll go to the public squares, the chowks, and there they will inspire the people. Come on, we can do it. No, we can defeat all these, countries. So they will inspire them, by clapping, by talking to them, right, and keeping up the spirit and the morale of the people. That is called idea of nation in arms. Did you get me that? Hello, all of you. Clear? Can I move on? Then हाँ हाँ हम कर सकते हैं चलो चलो like that, got it. Then we have national language. French became the national language. So the French National Convention declared French as a national language. She also came to adopt a national calendar. So France came to have a separate calendar where the year began on September the 1st. The year began on September the 1st, not January the 1st, but September the 1st, because that day France had become a republic. That day, France became a republic. Further, we have codification of laws. Laws came to be codified. An attempt was made at the codification of laws. Under this codification of laws, there was to be no imprisonment for debt. So earlier, if somebody borrowed a loan and he was not able to repay the loan, that person was punished and he was imprisoned. Now, there would be no imprisonment for debt. Number two, slavery was abolished in the French colonies. So France had colonies like Mauritius in the Indian Ocean, French Reunion in the Indian Ocean, then Pondicherry, Mahe, Yanam, Karaikal. These are all French settlements, trading stations. So slavery was abolished in the French colonies. Then women were given property right. Women could own some amount of property. Then you have the law of primogeniture. What is this law of primogeniture? Understand this. What was the case in France earlier? In France earlier, if a father, understand this, if a father had 4 sons, okay, if a father has 4 sons, or after the death of the father, the property of the father, entire property of the father will go to the eldest son only. Only the eldest will get or bequeath all the property of his father. The other sons will not get anything. That was the law. Now, the National Convention abolished this law. And under this, all the children will have equal rights to the parental property, to the father's property. This is law of primogeniture, which was abolished. Did you get me that, all of you? Hello? So law of primogeniture was abolished and all the children will have equal property rights. Right. Then metric system was introduced. What is metric system? New system of weights and measures. New system of weights and measures. Earlier, remember, in France, you have different types of weights and measures in different parts of the country. Now, a uniform system of weights and measures throughout the country was introduced called metric system. Then, to an extent, Christianity was restored. You remember earlier, National Assembly, what had it done? All the property of the church was taken away, and keeping that as security, paper currency had been introduced. And to a large extent, France had been de-Christianized. People felt very hurt because of that. That led to civil disorder, so, and because it had hurt the religious conscience of the people. The National Convention, to an extent, restored Christianity, right? And it accorded absolute religious toleration. These are codification of laws. Are you there with me? Should I repeat anything here? Can I move on? Hello? Metric system, new system of weights and measures. Nikhil, new system of weights and measures. Uniform system of weights and measures throughout France. Fifth point, metric system, I've already told you. Okay. Fifth point is that metric system, right? Uniform system of weights and measures. Then we come to social reforms. What are the reforms brought about by the National Convention in the society? Property of the emigres was confiscated. So who are the emigres? Those are pro-monarchists who had run away to neighboring countries like Austria. So all the property of the emigres was confiscated by the National Convention. Wealthy clergy and the nobles were considered to be suspects. So they kept an eye on the wealthy people, the clergy people, and the nobles. They were considered to be suspects. And all the property, the remaining property with the feudal lords were taken away. Nobles still enjoyed a lot of land rights, landed property. So all the property with the nobles was taken away. No compensation was given to those nobles. Understand this? Nobles had lands with them still. So all those lands were confiscated. All the lands with the nobles was confiscated. No compensation was given to these nobles. No compensation for their lost lands. No compensation was given. And then what did they do? The National Convention, they cut up those lands into small portions, small plots, and sold away to farmers on easy terms. So each and every farmer in France came to own a piece of land. In other words, peasant proprietors were created. Peasant proprietor, he is the owner of that land. The farmer himself is the owner of the land. So all the land from the nobles was taken away. No compensation was given to the nobles. And those lands which were seized from the nobles were divided into small plots and sold away to farmers on easy terms. So peasant proprietors were created. Then we have the laws of the maximum. What is this laws of the maximum? So this was a situation where France was having internal disorder within the country and external enemies, 6 countries declaring war. Therefore, under this laws of the maximum, salaries of people were fixed. Salaries were fixed. Salaries of workers were fixed. Okay, the salaries or wages of workers were fixed. I would say wages instead of salaries. Let us have wages. Okay, so wages of workers were fixed. And the prices were fixed. Prices of essential commodities were fixed, right? So nobody does black marketing or tries to inflate the prices. That's called loss of the maximum. Wages were fixed of the workers, and also the prices of essential commodities were fixed. Then everybody had to address each other as citizen. Everybody had to address each other as citizen. Then lastly, rationing was introduced. That is rationing of scarce commodities. Rationing of scarce commodities. That was introduced. Did you understand? Hello? Clear, all of you? Any doubts here? Can I move on? So then, hello, all of you. Okay, then you have the Constitution of 1795, which was brought into existence. Understand this? The National Assembly had brought out the Constitution of 1791. Now that was removed. Constitution of 1791 was set aside, and a new constitution was brought into existence for France. This is the Constitution of 1795. Under this, France retained her, had a republican form of government with we have two houses with a bicameral legislature. So you have a republic. France had a republic, okay, and a bicameral legislature, a legislature of two houses, bicameral legislature. So here, upper house called Council of Ancients, consisting of 500 members, a lower house consisting of 500 members. These are the two houses of the Parliament of France. And again, we have the dominance of the property classes. Again, voting rights were not given to everybody. Mind you, voting rights were not given to everybody, only to the property classes. Only those who had property and paid taxes to the government were given voting rights. Then, executive authority was in the hands of 5 directors. So these directors were elected by the legislature, and they appointed ministers to supervise the enforcement of laws. So there were 5 directors together called directory, and they enjoyed dictatorial powers, extraordinary powers. So this is about the French Revolution. Are you there with me? This is about the French Revolution. There are some more things to discuss. I'm not done with this topic. We are yet to discuss the merits and the demerits of this particular, the significance of the French Revolution with the internal impact and external impact. Just hold on. Are you there with me? Like, for example, everybody had to address each other as citizen, monsieur, monsieur. That's what they're supposed to talk, address each other. Like, for example, in America, even the president is called Mr. President, right? You not say sir and all that. They prefer to be addressed as Mr. So like that, everybody had to address each other as citizen, like citizen Joseph, like that, right? Right. Now let us look at why the revolution broke out in France. Now let us look at the other aspects of this topic. Why did the revolution break out in France? Why not in some other European country? Because monarchies existed in all Europe. All of Europe had monarchies. All of Europe had feudalism, including France. But what was so different in France that a revolution broke out in France alone and not in any other European country? Right. So that's what we are discussing now. Look here. Nature of French feudalism. One of the reasons why the revolution broke out is the nature of French feudalism. Now, we have discussed what is feudalism, right? So, a pyramidal system with the king at the apex. Then you have nobles below him, like the earls and the dukes, the barons, the knights, and then you have the peasants. So, feudalism as an institution existed all over Europe, including in France. So you have the king giving away certain fiefs or lands to the vassals below him, along with delegation of powers. In turn, the earls and the nobles, the vassals below the king, will in turn give away lands and delegate some powers to the vassals below them. So this is how it was. And in return, they enjoyed certain privileges, including non-payment of taxes. So what was so peculiar about French feudalism? Feudalism as an institution existed all over Europe. But what was so peculiar to French feudalism? You see, there was a French monarch called Louis the 13th. Louis the 13th. And this Louis the 13th had a prime minister called Cardinal Richelieu. Cardinal Richelieu, his prime minister. Now, Cardinal Richelieu, the prime minister of Louis the 13th, wanted Louis the 13th to be an absolute monarch. He wanted all the powers to be in the hands of the monarch. So what he did is, he took away all the powers and duties of the nobles. He took away not only the powers from the nobles, but also their duties, right? So he took away all the powers and duties of the nobles, but then they were allowed to enjoy their privileges, including non-payment of taxes. They don't need to pay taxes at all, no taxes. So they lost all their powers and whatever duties they were performing towards the government, because that was taken away by Cardinal Richelieu, and all powers came to be concentrated in the hands of the emperor. But then the nobles were allowed to enjoy their privileges, including non-payment of taxes. And this became a cause for irritation later. because the people of France could not accept this fact. They are not performing any duties towards the government, but they're enjoying their privileges, including non-payment of taxes. And they acted as a judge. They expected free labor, and on top of it, they're not paying any taxes, and that became a cause of irritation. This was not there in other parts of Europe. Only in France, this was a very peculiar arrangement, which was made by Louis the 13th minister, Cardinal Richelieu, and it continued even after that, under Louis the 14th and 15th and 16th also. And this became a cause for irritation among the people of France. This is number one. I didn't get you, Ankita. This is number one. Then number two is we had an enlightened middle class only in France. Only France had an enlightened middle class. You see, you have the philosophers like Voltaire, Rousseau, Montesquieu, who gave certain ideas. Those ideas were absorbed by the middle classes, and they were very conscious of their class, of their status. They were educated, were meritorious, but they were given a second category status. So the class consciousness of the middle class of France created a lot of dissatisfaction in their hearts and minds, because they were denied important positions in the government, and they were looked down upon by the monarch as well as by the privileged classes. And it was the middle classes who gave leadership to the masses. They were the ones who instigated the farmers and the artisans to revolt, and they were the ones, the middle classes, who became the leaders of the French Revolution in the first stage. Okay, this is number two. Whereas in other parts of Europe, you also had middle class, but they were not, they had not awakened. There were no philosophers in those countries, neither were they awakened. They were putting up with whatever exploitation was meted out to them by the king or the feudal lord. Whereas the French middle class were enlightened, they did not want to put up with exploitation anymore. They had had it enough. They had suffered for a long time. They didn't want to suffer more. And they were the ones who instigated the farmers and the other members of the commoners to rise in revolt and provided leadership to the masses. That is number two. Third is economic crisis. Only in France we had an economic crisis, unlike in other European countries, which was not there. So you have, I told you what are the reasons for the economic crisis. The monarch and the feudal lords using the hard-earned money collected from the farmers as taxes on conspicuous consumption, the wars which the French monarchs had indulged the country in, then backward methods of agriculture, shortage of land, overpopulation, then the privileged classes being exempted from the payment of taxation, the tax farming system, right? Then queens interfering in administration, nobles preventing the king from bringing about reforms, and also the wars which the kings had and involved the country in, and also the loans which France had contracted from other countries, for which she had to pay interest. So, and of course, all these things created a grave economic crisis. Then the next point is revolutionary atmosphere. Only in France we had a revolutionary atmosphere which led to the outbreak of the revolution. You see, it is said that when the revolution broke out, understand this please, when the revolution broke out, it was, we have looked at it, Bastille, the people of Paris attacked the Bastille, and they uh, broke up the gates of the Bastille and freed all the prisoners. And immediately, you have peasant revolts breaking out in the provinces. People in the rural areas came to know about the fall of the Bastille, and the farmers in the rural areas revolted en masse, and they uprooted local authority in those areas, and the revolution spread like wildfire. Now, you please understand, in the rural areas, the feudal lords were not present in their headquarters. When the revolution broke out, most of the feudal lords, the nobles, were not found in the rural areas, right? So it was very easy for the farmers to uproot local authority. What were they? Where were they found then? The nobles, the feudal lords, they were found in Paris. And what were they doing in Paris? They were enjoying the hustle and the bustle of city life, right? You have the king, they were trying to curry favors from the king, they were enjoying the dramas, the parties, the luxurious life which only a city life can provide. So they were not found in the rural areas. So when the revolution happened, it was easy for the farmers to uproot local authority, because there was no authority in the rural areas, because they were all absent, and they were found in the cities of Paris, particularly the cities of France, particularly Paris. This is number one. Number two is, it was said that Paris was a very dangerous city. You see, the peculiarity about France was, whenever anything happened in the capital, it had its repercussions in the countryside and vice versa. If anything happened in the countryside, it had its repercussions in the city of Paris. Now understand this. When rains failed in the countryside 2 consecutive years, what happened? There was shortage of food in the villages, in the countryside. Inflationary conditions happened, and thousands and lakhs of farmers migrated to the city of Paris. So, what happened in the countryside had an impact within Paris. You have a revolutionary atmosphere created in Paris because thousands and lakhs of farmers were found in the city of Paris searching for food, and bread riots were going on. Similarly, when the Bastille fell, Bastille was in Paris. When the Bastille fell, it had its repercussions in the countryside, right? Because simultaneously peasant revolts broke out. So Paris was considered to be a very dangerous city because it was beautifully connected by roads to the countryside. It was easy to go from Paris to the countryside and vice versa. And these roads connecting Paris to the countryside had been made by the or built by the Roman emperors and later developed by the Bourbons, by the French emperors. So it was beautifully connected. That was very peculiar to France again. At the same time, France, no, so the and one more thing is, you have for 2 continuous years rains failed for 2 continuous years, and there was a shortage of food in the countryside. People came away to the cities, particularly Paris, in search of food, creating a very revolutionary atmosphere there. And Louis wanted to impose additional taxes on the farmers. But then they forced him to call a meeting of the Estates General. And the summoning of the Estates General is said to mark the beginning of the French Revolution. This is why the revolution broke out in France. Did you understand, all of you? First cause of revolutionary atmosphere. Did you understand, all of you here? Cardinal Richelieu was the Prime Minister of Louis XIII, Garima, right? Okay, clear. So, nature of French feudalism, enlightened middle class, economic crisis, revolutionary atmosphere. This was absent in other parts of Europe. Only in France it was present, and that's why revolution broke out here. Okay, now let us look at the internal and external achievements of the French Revolution. The Ankita, the dictatorial powers were enjoyed by the directors, the 5 directors. They were called together as a directory, and they enjoyed uh, dictatorial powers. That was given by the Constitution of 1795. That is true. Now, let us look at the internal and external achievements of the French Revolution. Now, what are the changes brought about within France? First of all, you see, feudalism, serfdom was abolished. We have seen this. Feudalism came to an end, serfdom came to an end, privileges, whether based on birth or wealth, came to an end. You're born in a particular family or you're rich. On that basis, you're holding important positions in the government. That came to an end. Monarchy ended in France. Because of the revolution, monarchy ended and France became a republic and people became supreme in the country. Popular sovereignty was introduced, as mentioned by Rousseau, right? And in the economic sphere, the domination of the guilds was smashed. The guild domination ended, and you have the right to private property being introduced, free trade being introduced. So, free trade was introduced, right to private property was introduced, and a new France was born. So you knew France was born. Every farmer in France came to own a small plot of land. He was able to cultivate the land himself. He was able to eat his fill, strengthen his back, and he was able to even speak out boldly. He was not afraid of anybody. So you have a new France which was born after the revolution. In the administrative field, what are the changes brought about? You have elections introduced. Elections replaced nomination or selection. This is number one. Uniformity in administration was introduced. We have seen this: departments, cantons, communes, cities. So uniform administration throughout the country was introduced. Sale of offices like the nobility of the robe was abolished. Then it spread the sentiment of nationalism, the feeling of love towards one's country. That spread like wildfire. And that feeling of nationalism was accentuated by the attack on France by the foreign powers. When Austria and Prussia declared war, you have a feeling of nationalism arising among the Frenchmen. And when six countries declared war, they became more angry with those countries, and the love for France magnified among the people of France. So the idea of nation in the arms was also a byproduct of that aspect. And further, loyalty to the king was replaced by loyalty to the nation. People of France realized that in pure self interest, a king can do harm to his own people. A king can even harm his own people, and that's what Louis was up to. No, in pure self interest, just to hold on to power, he was ready to even fight against his own people by joining hands with the Austrian king. So therefore, people realized, that this is futile. So the idea of divine right theory of monarchy, enlightened despotism, all those concepts were confined to the dustbin. Nation became supreme compared to the king. So loyalty to the nation, loyalty to the king was replaced by loyalty to the nation. So these are the changes in the administration and the developments within France. Now, external impact I'll discuss tomorrow. I think I have just 4 more minutes. Do you have any doubts? External impact I'll discuss tomorrow. Is it fine? So, any doubts here? Are you clear till here, all of you? We will analyze this topic tomorrow. So, don't miss tomorrow's class. We'll analyze this topic, difference between National Assembly, National Convention, the various ideas of the French Revolution, all those things. The analytical aspect I'll discuss tomorrow because that is very, very important from the exam point of view. Yeah, republicanism. We'll come to that. Rule of law, republicanism, liberty, equality, fraternity, democracy, popular sovereignty. These are all the ideas thrown up by the French Revolution. Certain element of even socialism was introduced because socialist ideas are seen during the introduced during the Reign of Terror. Uh, no. See, some people might have not cleared the prelims. Doesn't matter. Don't take it to heart. I know you would have put in a lot of hard work. That is the nature of the exam, and that's how life is. Sometimes what you desire, you might not get it, but that should not break your heart. You analyze what went wrong, and my suggestion is by December end, you prepare for the mains thoroughly. Finish all those core subjects: history, economy, polity, geography from the mains point of view, right? Then finish your optional subject also, and you are ready for next year's mains, right? And then that preparation will help you to do better in next year's prelims. So a certain amount of luck is also required. Some people might have missed by 1 or 2 marks. We never know. So therefore, don't punish yourself this way. That is the nature of the exam, and most of the people don't clear in the first attempt. Very hardly few people clear in the first attempt. That's how the UPSC exam is, isn't it? Therefore, you make a better plan, and your time will come. No, our time came, isn't it, when we won the World Cup this time? After 13 years, we are winning an ICC trophy, and the players also will feel the same. That's why they were crying, and they were all happy. These are all tears of joy because that happiness, all the effort has come to fruition. The same thing will happen to you. So have confidence, have trust in God and in your own abilities, and have a good plan, and you prepare and be very optimistic. Napoleon will come later. Tomorrow, Napoleon. We'll discuss about Napoleon. Yeah, Sakshi, why not? If you're eligible, see, graduation, if you're a graduate and you're preparing for UPSC, these subjects are common. Whatever subjects, GS subjects are there, are common for other exams also. So it all depends where you stand, how supportive your family is. It's very important to have family support for an exam like UPSC because the gestation period is so much. 1.5 years from the time you fill in the application form and the final results come out. It's almost 1.5 years. So you have to prepare. The gestation period makes it very challenging, and you require the support of your family, some good friends, so that you're motivated always, and also you're driven from within. So that's very important, and you can always try other exams. That should be you should have a plan for you. Depends what age you are, right? All those things also matter. You have state services, right? State services are there. Banking exams are there. Then you have the Central Police Organization, CRPF, ITPP, ITBP, etc. All those exams are there. So they and so you keep looking at the employment Rozgar Samachar, so they keep asking you notifications. Notifications keep coming. You can keep applying for them also. It all depends upon your priority, whether you want to totally focus on UPSC for, let us say, 1 or 2 years. If you get through, then great within those 1 or 2 attempts. If not, you can slightly change your plan and maybe attempt other exams also, like that. It all depends. It varies from student to student. It is subjective. You should be a graduate, Dheeraj. You should be a graduate at the time of applying for the exam. You should be a graduate, right? So that's what it is. So all the best. You be very positive, learn from your mistakes, and finish off your main syllabus by end of this year. Then you can have a serious go at the next attempt, the next year. So thank you very much. I'll log out. We will discuss external factors of the external impact of the French Revolution. Then we'll come to Napoleon Bonaparte, and we'll also analyze the French Revolution tomorrow, right? And I can go to the next topic, unification of Germany, after I finish Napoleon Bonaparte. Okay, I've run out of time. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed this session of French Revolution. So we will meet tomorrow. Thank you very much. Yeah, Abhishek. Yeah, you can. It all depends. You go by your heart or what your heart says, Abhishek. Uh, right? Because you no, that Dinesh, that will not matter at all. I have a year gap between my bachelor's and master. That will it? It will not affect your result. No, they go by purely marks. What is your total? Your total marks in the mains and interview. That will determine your ranking, right? If you're preparing, if you're taking out time and preparing, obviously you will lose a year, isn't it, between your bachelor's and master's. So don't worry about it. They will not ask you all those things. They're not bothered about that. Your total marks is important. Okay, so you have a good night's sleep. We'll meet tomorrow. Thank you very much. Good night. I'm logging out.